Hello everyone, I am Mano Scaling, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also tell me where you are from and what time you are watching. Now get comfortable and relax. My name is Jackson Cole. I'm 33 years old, and this happened in October of last year. I just lost my job at the IT office where I'd spent 6 years, and my divorce papers had finally gone through a month prior. I was living alone in an apartment I could barely afford, still surrounded by packed boxes labeled with my ex-wife's handwriting: kitchen, bedroom, memories. When she left, she told me, "You're already a ghost in your own life, Jackson." The words kept rolling around in my head, and they hit me so hard that on a whim, I decided to prove her right by taking my dog, Diesel, and disappearing from the world for a couple of weeks. I chose Quartz Mountain Nature Park in Oklahoma. The place was remote, rocky, and dotted with jagged granite ridges that looked like prehistoric teeth jutting from the earth. My plan was simple: drive there, park, hike out with Diesel, set up camp, and spend 2 weeks off-grid to find myself. Or at least figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. No phone calls, no social media, no ex-wife reminding me of my failures. No half-empty office telling me my job was redundant. Just me, my dog, and nature. That was the plan anyway. I arrived on a cold Tuesday afternoon. The sky was a watery gray, low clouds stretching across the horizon. The park was mostly empty, off-season I guessed, and the ranger station had a back-in-1 hour sign taped to the window. That should have been my first clue that something was off, but I was so eager to vanish into the wilderness that I didn't think twice. I parked my old car near a trailhead, threw on my backpack, and gave Diesel a pat on the head. He was a sturdy pit lab mix, 6 years old, a rescue with short, dark fur and a crooked left ear. Diesel wagged his tail like he was ready for an adventure. Together, we set off down the trail, leaving behind the last bits of civilization. I felt excitement and fear swirling in my chest, but mostly I felt relief to be out of the city, away from everything that hurt. At first, it was beautiful. The shallow canyons, the sun glancing off the red and gray quartz-like rock, the dryness of the grass brushing against my boots. Diesel sniffed everything, occasionally barking at unseen critters. I walked until the sun began to dip behind a ridgeline, then set up camp in a small clearing sheltered by boulders. The wind blew in the late evening, and I remember thinking it's so quiet here. No cars, no voices, just an occasional gust sweeping through. I pitched my small tent, laid out my sleeping bag, and cracked open a can of chili over my portable stove. Diesel was curled at my feet, nose twitching at the smell of food. I remember being struck by how content I felt at that moment. Maybe this was exactly what I needed, to just be alone with my dog, figuring out who I was without all the noise. But from the moment I crawled into my sleeping bag that night, I had nightmares. I dreamed of a pale figure standing on a ridge, calling my name in a whisper so quiet it was almost lost to the wind. The figure's face was featureless, but it wore a wide-brimmed hat that looked like it belonged in another century. When I woke in the morning, Diesel was whining at the tent door, and I had the taste of dust on my tongue. We pressed on, deeper into the park. My plan was to hike a loop that would take me across ridges and valleys, giving me a variety of landscapes to camp in. The second day was when things first started turning strange. My phone, which I kept off to save battery, refused to power on when I tried to check the time. I'd charged it fully in the car before heading out, but it was a dead brick now. I wasn't surprised that there was no signal, but I was definitely unnerved that it seemed to have 0 battery left. I shrugged it off. After all, I was supposed to be disconnecting. I didn't need a phone. The sun was my clock, and my paper map was more reliable anyway. At least, that was my assumption. So I checked my map to see where the next water source would be, only to realize the topography wasn't matching what I saw around me. According to the map, the trail should be leading me toward a small creek, but I found no creek, just more dried gullies and rocky outcrops. Maybe I took a wrong turn somewhere. Still, it was a well-marked path. My confusion grew, but I tried to brush it aside. That night, I tried to make a campfire. The wind wasn't too bad, and I had plenty of dry kindling. But no matter how many matches I struck, the fire wouldn't catch. Finally, it flared and burned with an odd, bluish hue before flickering out. Diesel growled at the fire pit the entire time. Eventually, I gave up and used my little stove for a hot meal, wondering if the wood was just damp or had some kind of mineral in it. I slept poorly. Diesel was restless all night, occasionally barking at the darkness. I'd peer out of my tent with a flashlight and see nothing. At one point, though, I swore I heard footsteps on the rocky ground. Slow, deliberate steps circling our camp. When I called out, Diesel growled. Then it went silent. No footsteps, no answer. Just the rustle of wind. I stayed awake, heart pounding, for what felt like hours before exhaustion finally pulled me under. Come morning, my sleeping bag was unzipped. I remember thinking I must have kicked it open in my sleep. But what struck me was that the zipper was undone from the inside. Diesel was already outside the tent, pacing and whining. I tried to figure out if it was a malfunction of the bag or if I'd just gotten too warm in the night, but it left me with a nagging sense of unease. I set about making breakfast, only to find my water container was missing from my backpack. Thinking I was just scatterbrained, I searched the area until I found it about 15 yards away, wedged between two rocks. I had no memory of taking it out of my pack. Diesel was licking the container's side as if trying to indicate it had just appeared there. I began to wonder if I was sleepwalking, or if some small, cunning animal had managed to drag it. But there were no chew marks, no signs of tampering. It was just moved. Later that day, as we hiked, I decided to use my compass. The GPS on the phone was useless, so I stuck to old-school navigation. The compass needle spun lazily before settling in the opposite direction of north. I tapped it, shook it, held it away from any metal, but it still pointed in some random direction. I tested it against the sun's position, which told me the real east-west line, and the compass was definitely lying. Diesel was acting oddly, too. He kept sniffing the air and letting out these low whines as if he smelled something off. I kept telling myself that weird electromagnetic fields or some geological anomaly might be messing with the compass. Maybe that same anomaly was messing with my phone battery. It's easier to believe in rational explanations than face the gnawing possibility that something was very wrong in those mountains. That evening, I set up camp near a large boulder that offered partial shelter from the wind. My legs were tired, and Diesel seemed worn out. I tried to keep my spirits up, so I wrote in my journal. Just a few notes about how I felt, which route I was planning next, that sort of thing. I had always found journaling therapeutic. By the time darkness fell, I'd tried for another campfire with the same results. Refusal to light properly, flickers of odd colors. Eventually, a small flame held, though it sputtered like it was starved of oxygen. Diesel laid next to me, ears twitching. I sat there, staring at the silhouettes of the rocks, feeling unsettled. The night was too quiet. Not a single insect chirp, not a hint of distant wildlife. Silence pressed in around me. I was about to drift off when Diesel suddenly stood and stared into the darkness beyond the faint light of the fire. He was growling again, the fur along his spine standing up. My heart started pounding. I whispered, "Hello?" into the darkness, as if expecting some lost hiker to wander into view. No one answered. Then, from the blackness, I heard my own voice. "Diesel, come here, boy. Come on, Diesel." It was exactly how I usually called him, same intonation, same friendly lilt. I froze. Diesel tilted his head, confused. My heart hammered in my chest. I was certain my mouth had not moved, yet the voice was mine. It came from somewhere off to the left, near a cluster of thin trees about 20 yards away. Fear anchored me to the spot. I tried to rationalize maybe it was an echo, or I was remembering speaking and it got jumbled. But Diesel barked, as if responding to me, and then the voice repeated, "Diesel, come here, boy," with a rasping undercurrent, as though it was recorded on old tape. I stood and slowly moved the flashlight in that direction. The beam revealed only twisted branches and rock. My chest tightened in a primal kind of dread. Something was out there, repeating my voice. I backed toward my tent, whistling softly for Diesel to follow. He did, though he kept his eyes locked on the darkness. We spent that night huddled in the tent. I tried to ignore the slow, creeping sense that we were being watched, my ears attuned to every subtle noise. At some point, I must have dozed off. When I woke, it was morning, bright and harsh. My back was stiff and Diesel wasn't inside the tent. Panicking, I tore open the flap to find him lying just outside, staring at me as if expecting me to emerge. Something about his posture, the way he stared, felt off. I couldn't pinpoint why. "Hey, boy," I said softly. Diesel looked at me, wagged his tail once, then went back to staring at the horizon. Usually he'd come bounding up, sniffing my hand, wanting affection or breakfast. This time, he seemed distracted. I shrugged it off. Maybe he was picking up a scent from a rabbit or deer. I poured some kibble in his bowl, and he sniffed it but didn't eat. That was odd. He was usually a voracious eater. I tried to coax him, but he whined and turned away. My stomach churned with worry. Then I noticed my journal lying open, face down on the ground near the extinguished fire pit. It was open to the last page I'd written on, but the words were off. I recognized my handwriting, but the sentences described events that hadn't happened. Saw the pale man again. Diesel barked, but he wouldn't move. My ears bled when I heard the whistle. I had no memory of writing that. My last entry had been about the difficulty in lighting the fire and how spooked I felt, but now there were paragraphs describing me hearing some kind of whistle that made blood trickle from my ears. The date was correct, but the content was entirely foreign to me. My hand trembled as I flipped through the pages. Everything else matched my recollection, until that bizarre final entry. I felt watched, as if something was peering over my shoulder. Diesel whined again. I packed up quickly, deciding it was time to leave the area. I'd had enough. I told myself I'd just get back to the car, maybe check into a cheap motel near the nearest town, and figure out my life from there. But when I tried to follow the trail back the way I came, I couldn't find it. Every path seemed to loop around or lead into canyons that weren't marked on the map. My compass was still spinning uselessly. The sun overhead felt too bright, as if it had jumped directly to midday. We wandered for hours. My water supply was running low, and Diesel still refused to eat. Panic began to coil in my gut. If I didn't find the way out by nightfall, would I be stuck wandering again in the dark, with that voice or that figure out there? Eventually, I spotted a shape in the distance. A tall figure in a wide-brimmed hat, standing on a rock outcrop. Relief and dread mingled in me. Relief, because I wasn't alone. Dread, because something about that figure felt extremely wrong. It didn't move. It was just watching. I raised a hand to wave or call out, but Diesel growled, a deep and urgent warning. The figure slowly turned, though it didn't look like it took any steps. One moment it was facing me, the next it angled away, then it vanished behind a rock. I decided to skirt around that area, not wanting to have a direct encounter with whoever or whatever that might be. But the further I walked, the more it felt like the terrain was repeating itself. A certain twisted tree, a pile of stones that looked like a mini cairn, then a cleft in the rock. We'd pass them, and then 10 minutes later, I'd see the same arrangement. Diesel's ears flattened, and he began whining in short bursts. My heart thudded as I realized we were looping, or time was playing tricks, or something was deliberately reshaping the land around us. Late afternoon, I found a small, shallow cave that looked somewhat sheltered. I decided we'd rest there, gather our thoughts, and try again at dawn. My eyes were gritty from exhaustion. Diesel lay down with a strange sigh like he was in pain or discomfort. I quickly rummaged through my bag for first aid supplies. I didn't see any obvious injuries on him. That's when I found a second object that did not belong in my pack. A small, battered journal with frayed edges. It looked old, decades old, but the front cover had my name scrawled across it in shaky ink, Jackson Cole. My heart pounded. I'd never seen it before. I flipped the cover open. The first page had a date, 1937. The entry read, "They found me half dead after the dust storm. Some nights, I can still hear the wind screaming my name. This place is cursed, or maybe I'm cursed. Time is a circle." It was definitely not my writing, though I recognized some letters that looked eerily close to my own style. I dropped the journal in alarm. Diesel huffed. I tried to calm my breathing. This made no sense. 1937? That was the year a massive dust storm apparently killed some folks in this region. I'd read about it online in passing, but how the hell did this journal get in my pack with my name on it? My mind was spinning. Was I losing it? Sleep deprivation? Or was someone messing with me? I forced myself to read on, scanning later pages. More disjointed notes. I see them in my dreams. They want me to trade places. I might let them. Then a scrawl that read, "He's wearing my face." And on the very last page, "If you're reading this, it means you're next." A cold sweat broke over me. The sun was dipping low outside, painting the rocks in twilight. I decided I'd try to keep watch, to see if that figure or anything else approached. Diesel didn't move much. He seemed withdrawn. I tried to feed him again. He sniffed the food and turned away. My voice cracked as I said, "It's okay, boy," even though nothing felt okay. At some point in the early evening, I heard a man's voice calling out, "Hello? Is someone there?" I jumped up, half in relief, half in terror. Diesel stood too, but no growl this time. I walked cautiously out of the cave and saw a ranger walking toward me. He wore a dusty uniform, a wide-brimmed hat, and carried a small pack. He raised his hand in greeting. "You lost?" he asked. His presence felt both comforting and unsettling. Something in my gut twisted when I saw his face. It was deeply tanned, with lines around his eyes, but he seemed wrong, like something was missing from his expression. Still, desperation overcame my fear. I stammered, I think so. I've been trying to get back to the main trail for a day and a half now, but everything's messed up. My compass is broken, the map doesn't match anything, and my dog's acting weird." The ranger nodded sympathetically. "Happens sometimes. The quartz in these rocks can confuse compasses. Let me guide you back." He flashed a smile. "Name's Ranger Haddock." He motioned for me to follow him, and we hiked out of the cave area. Part of me was screaming that I shouldn't trust him. Some primal alarm bell was ringing. But another part of me just clung to the hope of rescue. The ranger asked me about where I was from, why I came out here. I gave short, truthful answers. I asked him if he'd heard anything about weird phenomena or the rumors of hauntings. He chuckled softly. "I've heard all sorts of ghost stories," he said. "Just old legends about folks lost in dust storms." His manner put me somewhat at ease, but Diesel was rigid at my side, staring at the ranger without blinking. That unnerved me. Usually Diesel would wag his tail at any friendly newcomer. Now it was like he was watching a predator. Still, we trekked for an hour until the last traces of daylight left the sky, and I realized we were back in a spot I recognized. A spot we'd been earlier that same day, with the twisted tree and the mini-cairn. My stomach dropped. The ranger insisted this was a different location, but I knew it wasn't. Then Diesel started to growl at the ranger. Ranger Haddock scowled. "Your dog's not well," he said. The tone in his voice was almost accusatory. I tried to apologize to calm Diesel, but the dog snarled. The ranger took a step forward, and Diesel lunged. I had to grab Diesel's collar to hold him back. The ranger took a sharp breath. "Should I leave you here then?" His eyes flicked to me in a strange, cold way. He seemed disappointed. Suddenly, I was sure something was off about him. The hair on my arms stood up. I said, voice trembling, "Thank you for your help, but maybe I'll just set up camp again. It's too dark to keep going." The ranger stared at me for a long moment, then nodded stiffly. "Suit yourself," he said. "If you need me, I'll be nearby." With that, he walked away into the darkness. Diesel let out a low whine, as if in warning or relief. I stumbled off to find a place to pitch my tent. Every bone in my body was rattled with tension. Diesel seemed more normal once the ranger was gone, wagging his tail a bit, but still refused to eat. I managed to start a small fire with a few scraps of paper, one of which was a page I tore from that old journal, hoping the flame might catch from the dryness. The fire glowed in an unsettling greenish hue. The smoke smelled acrid. That night was the worst. Sometime around midnight, Diesel disappeared. I woke to a cold wind and found the tent flap open. Diesel was gone, and so was my flashlight. Panic hammered my chest. I shouted for him, but my voice echoed back strangely. I spent at least an hour stumbling around in the dark, calling his name, barely able to see. At times, I heard panting or the jingle of his collar, but it would move away before I could get close. Eventually, I followed the faint sound of water dripping and ended up near a narrow crevice in the rocks. Inside that crevice, I saw the faint reflection of eyes. "Diesel?" I whispered. A shape emerged. It looked like Diesel, same size, same silhouette. But something was wrong with his eyes. They didn't reflect the light as a dog's eyes do. They were dull, black pits. He made no sound, didn't come forward wagging his tail. Instead, he just stared, half in shadow, half in moonlight. My heart was in my throat. I slowly approached and he flinched away, disappearing deeper into the crevice. I followed for a few steps, fear warring with concern. But the passage got narrower, and eventually I had to back out for fear of getting trapped. When I exited the crevice, the ranger stood behind me in the moonlight. I nearly jumped out of my skin. He said nothing for a moment, just stared at the crevice. Then he whispered, "You shouldn't follow him in there. That's his place now." Confusion and panic roiled in my mind. "Where is Diesel?" I demanded, forcing my voice not to shake. The ranger shrugged. "Your dog's lost, might be gone for good. You should worry about yourself." His gaze locked onto me, and I noticed something horrifying. He had no reflection of moonlight in his eyes either. They seemed lifeless, dark. He smiled too wide, too long, as though he was trying to mimic a human grin. I staggered back. "What? Who are you?" I whispered, throat tight. He said nothing, but the corners of his mouth twitched as if he was unused to controlling facial muscles. Then he lunged at me. I dove to the side, scraping my hands on the rocks, adrenaline surging. He grabbed at my backpack, tearing the strap, but I slipped free. I turned and ran, stumbling over jagged stones, breath ragged in my chest. I heard him behind me, not quite running but moving quickly. I risked a glance over my shoulder. He was only a few strides away, reaching out with a hand that seemed unnaturally long. I frantically scrambled up a rocky incline, nearly tripping. The ranger's voice rasped, "We can help each other. Just one name. Trade me one name." The words made no sense, but they filled me with a nauseating terror. Summoning strength, I shoved a loose boulder down behind me. It tumbled, striking the ranger in the leg, knocking him sideways. He let out a guttural cry that echoed around the rock walls. Then I ran, not sure where I was going, only knowing I had to get away. After what felt like an eternity, I collapsed near a small ravine. My lungs burned. My watch said it was midnight, but the sky was already brightening as if dawn approached. That nauseating sense of time being broken sank in again. I forced myself to keep moving, terrified that the ranger would appear behind me at any moment. Eventually, I found a new vantage point near another cluster of boulders. There, by some miracle, I heard Diesel's distinctive bark. It sounded distant, but it was definitely him. Summoning all my courage, I followed the sound, weaving through narrow gullies. Then I saw him standing on a ledge about 15 feet above me, whining softly, his face lit by the faint pre-dawn glow. Relief washed over me. "Diesel," I called gently. He turned his head. This time his eyes seemed normal, reflecting the faint light. He whined again, tail hanging low. Carefully, I climbed up to him. He let me approach, and when I put my hand on his fur, he pressed against me, whimpering. I'd never seen him so scared. I ran my hands over him, checking for injuries. He was trembling, but otherwise okay. I noticed, though, that his collar was twisted, as if it had been removed and hastily put back on backwards. The name tag was flipped around. My mind churned. Maybe that thing had tried to do something with Diesel. Maybe Diesel broke away. I had no time to dwell on it. The important thing was that I had him back. We needed to escape. We moved as the early daylight grew. I was determined to find a route out, even if it meant ignoring the trails and forging a direct path. Several times, the land seemed to shift. I would climb a small ridge, expecting to see a valley on the other side, but instead I found a rocky plateau. Diesel stayed close, occasionally looking over his shoulder nervously. Finally, around midday, if midday was truly midday, we stumbled upon a cave entrance in a shadowed pocket of rock. Inside, old crates, battered camping supplies, and tattered photos littered the ground. The smell of decay lingered. Diesel wouldn't go in. He whimpered at the threshold. But something compelled me to step inside, maybe looking for a tool or a flare or anything that could help us. My skin prickled with dread, but I was beyond desperation. As my eyes adjusted, I saw that the walls of the cave were lined with scratched markings. Names, dates, tallies. Some were so old they'd been worn away by time. I saw modern references too, from the 70s, 80s, even the 2000s. A pile of rusted pocket watches and wristwatches lay in a corner, their glass faces broken, and none displayed the correct time. In fact, most had no hands at all. I picked up a photograph from a wooden crate. It showed a hiker with a wide grin and a dog by his side. On the back, someone had scrawled, "Found him 4 days after he went missing." He said his name was John, but we found a license that said otherwise. My heart pounded. Another photo showed a group of campers, all looking terrified, the date stamp reading 1972. One man in the photo wore a ranger uniform. I recognized the face as the same man who had attacked me last night. But the photo's color was old, decades old. My stomach lurched. I saw more pictures, mutilated bodies, half buried in dust. A dog that looked eerily like Diesel, only from the 1950s. My mind reeled. Then Diesel barked from outside, a high-pitched, frantic bark. I dropped the photos and turned to leave, but a flicker of movement at the edge of my vision stopped me. Something was in the back of the cave. I raised my flashlight. A tall figure stepped forward, wearing that same wide-brimmed hat, face pale as bone, eyes black holes. Its shape seemed almost liquid, shifting in the half-light. It didn't move toward me, it just opened its mouth in a silent scream. Then, in my own voice, it whispered, "Jackson, come here." My breath caught. I couldn't feel my legs. The creature extended a hand, unnaturally long fingers beckoning. Mustering every ounce of will, I turned and sprinted out. Diesel yelped when he saw me. I must have looked terrified, but as soon as I stepped into the light, an iron grip clamped around my shoulder from behind. The ranger. He'd caught up with me. I turned to struggle, but he was impossibly strong. He forced me to the ground. Diesel snarled and leapt at him, but the ranger backhanded Diesel with an inhuman motion. Diesel went skidding across the dirt with a pained whine. The ranger pinned me. His eyes, darker than before, bored into mine. "Give me a name," he hissed, "and you can leave." I didn't know what he meant, but he repeated it. "Give me a name, Jackson, anyone. They'll take your place. It's simple, trade me." My mind reeled with confusion and horror. A swirling sense of wrongness filled me as if I was at the center of some ancient, cursed ritual. Then Diesel came charging back, teeth bared, and latched onto the ranger's arm. The ranger howled, his voice warping. He released me, thrashing to dislodge Diesel. I scrambled away, searching blindly for something, anything, to use as a weapon. My hand closed around a rusted metal stake, maybe the broken leg of a camping stool or a tent peg. I lunged. The ranger, distracted by Diesel, didn't react fast enough. I drove the jagged metal into his side. He shrieked, a piercing, otherworldly sound that sent my ears ringing. He collapsed onto one knee, blackish fluid seeping from the wound, the fluid oddly thick and shimmering like oil. Diesel growled, maintaining his grip. Summoning all my adrenaline, I slammed a nearby rock onto the ranger's lower leg. There was a sickening crunch and he screamed again. The horror of what I'd done flooded me, but I knew it was us or him. I pushed the boulder deeper, pinning his limb. His face contorted, eyes rolling, and for a moment it shifted to someone else's face, my ex-wife, contorted in agony. I nearly vomited at the sight. Diesel let go and limped to my side, panting hard. We turned and stumbled away from the cave, leaving the ranger's shrieks echoing behind us. Every step felt like my muscles would give out. My mind raced with shock, fear, and confusion. But I had no choice but to keep going. I had to find a way out. Time blurred. We wandered aimlessly through twisting gullies and over rocky ridges that seemed to shift when we weren't looking. My feet bled in my boots, and Diesel limped, favoring one leg. The sky overhead didn't change, stuck in some perpetual half-light. Eventually, exhaustion overcame me, and I collapsed. Diesel curled up next to me, whimpering softly. I drifted into a nightmare-ridden sleep, seeing flickers of the ranger's face, the pale figure in the cave, and that battered journal from 1937. When I regained consciousness, everything was bright. Actual morning sunlight. The real dawn, warm and golden, not that half-light. My watch read 7:15 a.m., though it had read 4 a.m. just an hour ago. Time was definitely broken in that place, or else something was messing with our perception. But the clarity of daylight gave me a renewed sense of direction. I saw a faint path leading downhill between two ridges. I followed it. Diesel hobbled behind me, both of us wounded but determined. To my astonishment, as we turned a bend, I spotted the shape of a rescue party. 2 men in orange jackets and a woman in a sheriff's uniform, combing the area with a search dog. They saw me and waved, shouting. I nearly collapsed in relief. The sheriff, a middle-aged woman with graying hair, rushed to help me. She asked if I was Jackson Cole. I nodded, too shocked to speak. She told me I was reported missing by a concerned friend who knew I'd gone out here. They'd been searching for nearly 4 days. I almost wanted to laugh. 4 days was about right, but it felt like centuries. They guided me out of the canyon to an ATV, then to a waiting ambulance at a trailhead that looked older and more worn than the one I'd started from. Diesel stuck close to me, refusing to be separated. Medics gave us water, checked my vitals, bandaged Diesel's leg. I was delirious, drifting in and out, but I remember them repeatedly asking, "Were you alone?" I said yes. I told them about the ranger, but they shook their heads, said no official ranger had been assigned to this area in years. They told me that sometimes transients or squatters wore old uniforms to con hikers, but they hadn't heard of any sightings. I didn't argue. How could I explain the real truth? I fainted in the ambulance. When I woke next, I was in a hospital bed, an IV in my arm. Diesel was apparently taken to a local veterinarian to get stitches for a small cut on his shoulder. A detective came by, asked me 100 questions about a possible attacker in the park. I gave them a heavily edited version of the story, that some lunatic in a ranger uniform chased me. We fought, and I escaped. They didn't seem entirely convinced, but they let me speak to a counselor. Everyone chalked it up to a traumatic encounter, maybe a near-fatal scuffle with a deranged hermit or criminal. I let them think that. The alternative was unexplainable. I spent a week recovering. My phone was never found. All my gear, aside from the battered backpack, was left scattered across the mountains, presumably. The local news did a brief piece on me, "Missing hiker found alive," but it hardly made a splash. Once I was discharged, I ended up in a physical rehab facility for my ankles and knees, which I'd battered crossing the rocky terrain. Diesel was allowed to visit me after a few days, and I cried when I first saw him, bandaged but alert. He wagged his tail and gently licked my face, my real Diesel. That was the happiest moment since the ordeal. I tried to forget the horrors, to write them off as delirium, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw that wide-brimmed hat, that thing's black eyes. I felt the eerie sense of time looping in the dusty quartz hills. Some nights, I woke up screaming, sure I heard my own voice calling from somewhere else in the room. 3 days before I left rehab, I was rummaging through my bag of belongings when I found that old, battered 1937 journal again. I stared at it, heart pounding. I had no memory of packing it, but there it was. The hospital staff said it was among my personal effects found in my backpack. Every page but one was blank now, like the text had vanished. The final page simply read, in shaky writing, "You brought something back." I almost dropped the journal. My mouth went dry. The nurse asked if I was okay. I nodded mechanically, but I felt a cold sweat trickle down my back. I told myself maybe it was just blank because water had damaged it or the pencil had faded. But the paper looked unblemished, perfectly new, aside from the battered cover and those 6 words on the last page. That night, I woke up to the faint sound of panting. Diesel lay asleep on his side across the room. I realized the panting was coming from behind me. I turned, half expecting to see a caretaker. Instead, I saw a silhouette, large and dog-like, crouched near the corner. My mouth went dry. I blinked, and it was gone. Diesel stirred in his sleep, whimpering. I tried to steady my breathing, telling myself it was a hallucination. Stress, fear, trauma. The day I was released, I gathered my things. The nurse helped me to the lobby. Diesel was waiting there. But he wasn't wagging his tail, he just stared at me, head tilted. For a moment, my heart seized. I saw that black emptiness in his eyes. Then he blinked, and they were normal brown again. He trotted forward, licked my hand. Relief flooded me, though the fear lingered in my gut. As we walked out of the rehab center, I dared to open the journal again. Blank. Even the final words were gone now. Nothing but empty pages. But a subtle smell of dust rose from them, the same dusty smell I'd encountered back in the mountains. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had clung to me, or to Diesel, or both. Some part of that place had latched on, refusing to let go. I'm back in my apartment now, trying to pick up the pieces of my life. Diesel sleeps in the corner, but sometimes I catch him staring at me in that odd, too intense way. Maybe it's my imagination. Maybe not. I keep the curtains closed. I hardly sleep. I've had nightmares about the ranger crawling out of that cave, dragging a shattered leg behind him, seeking me again. Worse than the nightmares is the sense of time slipping. Some days I blink and it's evening. Other days drag like decades. My watch might show 1 p.m., but the clock on the wall says 3:30. I've replaced both watch and clock multiple times, but it keeps happening. Last week I found my journal with new writing in it, describing a conversation with my ex-wife that never actually happened. And Diesel's collar was unbuckled, lying on the floor, even though I know I fastened it after his bath. Everyone tells me I'll recover, that it's just post-traumatic stress. The doctors prescribe medication. The detective still wants to know if I can identify the man who attacked me. I just shake my head. It's safer that way for them. People keep hinting I might need therapy or maybe a psychiatric evaluation. I let them talk. They didn't see what I saw. It's late now. Diesel's asleep, or pretending to be. There's a scratch at my door every so often. No one's there when I check. My phone buzzes with notifications that vanish the moment I unlock it. I keep hearing footsteps in the hall. I record myself at night just to prove I'm not losing it. The recordings pick up faint voices, sometimes speaking in my tone, sometimes in the ranger's. Trade me a name, it says, over and over. I realize I'm still a ghost in my own life, just like my ex-wife said, but it's a different kind of haunting now. And deep down, I know I can't outrun it. That place, those mountains, took something from me, or maybe replaced something inside me. I still wake up with dust in my mouth, tasting that old, stale wind. Sometimes I catch myself thinking, if I just give them a name, maybe it'll leave me alone. But I don't know who them even is. I wish I could say I found closure or made peace. But the truth is, every day I feel that presence. At times, I glimpse Diesel's reflection in the window. It's not him. The shape is wrong. Then I blink, and the reflection is normal again. I can't help but wonder if my real dog ever made it back from those ridges, or if I'm living with something that only looks like Diesel. Yesterday, I mustered the courage to open the battered old journal one more time. The pages were blank as usual. Then, in front of my eyes, words began to appear faintly. Come back. We aren't finished. I dropped the book in horror, but the letters lingered, flickering like a glitch. Then they faded away, leaving the page pristine. Maybe I'll go back someday, or maybe they'll come to me. I don't think it matters, because no matter where I go, the echo of that voice follows. Diesel, come here, boy. Sometimes it's the ranger's voice, sometimes my own. Diesel whines, tail tucked between his legs, like he knows the call is for him alone. I've considered getting rid of the journal, burning it or throwing it away, but some force stops me every time. It feels like a tether, a thread connecting me to the quartz mountains. Maybe if I destroy it, I'll set something worse free, or I'll lose my mind entirely. So I keep it locked in a trunk in my bedroom, though I still hear it calling to me sometimes. For now, all I can do is wait, half expecting my phone to ring with a voice on the other end telling me it's time to trade a name, my name, or Diesel's, or someone else's. I keep telling myself that I'm stronger than that I'd never do it. But on sleepless nights, the line between nightmares and reality starts to blur, and I remember the relief I felt when that search party found me. I'm not sure how to end this story except to say that if you ever decide to wander off grid in the Quartz Mountains, be very sure of who you are and who your dog is when you come back. Because some bargains are made without words. Some curses live in the silent places between breath and heartbeat. And if you hear your own voice calling to you from the darkness, do not follow it. Turn around, find another path, or run, because once you look into that darkness, it looks into you, and sometimes it never stops looking. 01. My name is Matthew Kane. I'm 33 years old. This happened in late October of last year, 2025, in the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness of Idaho. I've never told anyone the full story. Not the paramedics who found me, not my ex-girlfriend when she visited me in the hospital, and definitely not the local authorities who asked too many questions I couldn't answer. Sometimes, I wonder if they thought I was insane. Sometimes, I'm not entirely sure I'm not. I'm writing all this down now, as best as I can remember it, if only to convince myself I didn't imagine everything. But I can't ignore the physical scars on my shoulder and the tooth marks that look barely human. And I can't forget the memory of a dog who was my best friend, and the wrongness in him after he disappeared. I took up the idea of going into the Selway Bitterroot backcountry after my 5-year relationship ended in a slow-motion train wreck. My ex, Katrina, and I had been living together in Boise, and when it was over, it felt like my whole life collapsed. I wasn't coping well. I was anxious, depressed, jumping from freelance gig to freelance gig. People would say, "You should go out and find yourself." And at the time, I was gullible enough to think a couple of weeks alone in the wilderness might fix me. I'm not a veteran, nor am I some wilderness survival expert. I code, I watch Netflix. I've gone on a few hikes and overnight car camping trips near well-traveled campgrounds. Nothing like plunging into an untamed forest, miles from the nearest sign of civilization. But I researched, read endless blog posts, watched YouTube tutorials on water purification, emergency shelters, knots, and anything else I thought might keep me alive. I packed carefully. Enough freeze-dried meals for a week, a portable stove, water filter, topographic maps, a brand new satellite-capable GPS, a cheap brand, but I assumed it would do, and my phone with an offline navigation app as backup. I wanted redundancy because I knew I'd have no cell signal out there. The final piece was my 9-year-old golden retriever, Rusty. He was arthritic and slowing down, but always game for a good hike. I figured if anyone will keep me sane out there, it's Rusty. We drove 5 hours north from Boise, then veered off the highway onto increasingly rough dirt roads. By the time we reached the nearest official trailhead, the sun was going down behind the mountains. My plan was to camp near the trailhead for the first night and then venture deeper into the wilderness the next day. The first evening was uneventful enough, just me fumbling with gear, trying to light a campfire in the half-dark. Rusty rolled in the pine needles and napped near the flickering glow. If I had known what would happen, I would have slept in the car and driven straight back home in the morning. But I wanted to prove something to myself, that I could break away from my old life, from heartbreak and mental fatigue, from that awful sense of failure that had haunted me for months. That's how this entire nightmare started, with me trying to prove I was stronger than I was. The first 2 days weren't so bad. I mean, I was stiff, my shoulders hurt from carrying the pack, and Rusty seemed a bit more tired than usual, but we kept going. The terrain was shockingly rugged. Steep inclines, sharp ridges, deep canyons. Even if my map told me there was a relatively flat route, real life disagreed. I often had to bushwhack, skirting around fallen logs and dense brush. But there was something hypnotic about the endless pine forest that made me believe I was at the threshold of a profound experience. Late on the second day, I noticed that my GPS started glitching. I turned it on to see how far we'd traveled, and the location icon would jump all over the map, sometimes blinking out entirely. "Okay," I said aloud, telling myself that cheap electronics fail all the time. I still had the offline map on my phone, and paper maps for that matter, so I didn't panic, not yet. Night 2 was when things got weird. The sun set behind an imposing line of jagged mountain peaks. I gathered enough wood to keep a small fire going, or so I thought. I remember it was a cold, clear night. Stars were unbelievably bright out there, like a spilled jar of glitter across black velvet. While I was crouched near the fire warming my hands, Rusty let out a low, continuous growl. At first, I assumed it was an animal, maybe a deer or a wolf or some other creature I wasn't familiar with. But the longer I listened, the more uneasy I felt. Rusty rarely growled like that. His hackles were raised. He was staring into the trees, ears pinned back. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it in the direction of his gaze. All I saw were trunks and branches, shadows moving when the beam flickered over them. I told myself not to worry, but something was off. The woods felt too quiet, except for the swirling wind that sent the scent of pine and something almost metallic across the campsite. I remember I added another chunk of wood to the fire, trying to reassure myself with the flicker of light. That's when the flames changed color. At first, they were the normal orange and red, but then I saw flickers of green, and then a ghostly blue. I know certain substances, chemicals in wood, for instance, can alter flame color. But in that moment, it felt unnatural. I tried to get my phone out to take a video, but the phone was dead, even though I'd charged it that morning. Meanwhile, Rusty wouldn't settle down. He paced around, whining. Eventually, I managed to doze off, only to be startled awake by something scuttling near my sleeping bag. Rusty was barking furiously. I fumbled for my headlamp. When I turned it on, nothing was there except the trees. Rusty's barking died to a whimper. I told myself it was just a squirrel or a raccoon, but the sense of unease sank deeper into my bones. Day 3 brought more confusion. By late morning, my phone had power again, which didn't make sense because I hadn't recharged it. The battery icon showed 53%, where it had shown 0% the night before. If I were more rational, maybe I would have suspected a glitch or that I'd misread something in my half-asleep state, but it just felt unexplainable. Rusty was slower than usual, and he kept looking back, as if checking the path behind us. He did that every few minutes. We hiked, paused for lunch near a small creek, then tried to find the marked trail to continue further in. The map I carried indicated the path would lead to a lookout point. Instead, we found ourselves in a clearing with no visible footpath. My phone's navigation app insisted I was half a mile south of the trail, but according to the map, I should have been right on top of it. I spent an hour wandering in circles, but the landscape refused to match anything on paper. As afternoon wore on, I realized I needed to pick a spot to camp. The only suitable area was close to that same creek, though it was deeper into the woods than I liked. I set up my tent on a relatively flat patch of ground. Rusty just lay there, watching the tree line with anxious eyes. That evening, the fire refused to stay lit, no matter how much tinder I used. When I finally got a good flame going, it sputtered and died in under a minute. At one point, I could have sworn the flame leapt 3 feet high, turned blue, and then flicked out like a candle. I tried using my gas stove to at least heat water for dinner, but the stove's fuel canister seemed empty, even though it was brand new. That was impossible. I'd tested it before leaving the car. Fine, I thought. I'll eat my freeze-dried meals cold if I have to, so I unzipped my pack and found that the sealed pouches of food, ones guaranteed not to spoil for 2 years, had a rancid stench. I nearly gagged. Rusty sniffed one and backed away, ears flattened. All that remained remotely edible were a few granola bars. Frustrated and a little frightened, I forced myself to eat half a bar for dinner and gave Rusty some kibble. Then I crawled into my sleeping bag early, hoping a night's rest would fix my perspective. That night, I had dreams that didn't feel like dreams. Shadows moving in a circle around me, whispering my name. Matthew, you came out here to die. Over and over. Sometimes I heard the sound of antlers scraping on tree trunks. When I opened my eyes, it was still dark, but my watch claimed it was 9 a.m. My phone said 2:15 a.m. My body felt stiff, and I realized I was outside of my tent entirely, lying in cold dirt. Rusty was nowhere in sight. Panicking, I called his name. After a minute, he ambled out from behind a tree, whining softly. My backpack, which I'd left in the tent, was sitting next to me. Only the top flap was open, and inside everything was soaked despite no sign of rain. I felt an inexplicable chill. It was as if I'd blacked out and done something in my sleep, but I couldn't recall any of it. This was beyond normal exhaustion or disorientation. Something wasn't right with this place, or maybe with me. Day 4 was the day I lost Rusty for the first time. The morning light, whenever actual morning began, brought no clarity. My watch wouldn't match my phone wouldn't match the position of the sun, and none of it matched my own sense of time passing. I wanted to just pack up and go back the way I came, but I couldn't figure out which direction that was, exactly. The forest itself seemed to have changed. Tree formations I swore I recognized had moved, or maybe I was turned around. Anxiety twisted my gut into knots. Rusty trotted a few yards ahead. He froze at a ridge that overlooked a narrow valley. His posture stiffened, tail raised in an alert stance. He growled low. My nerves were already frayed, so I snapped at him. "Come on, boy, we're going. Let's go." I took a few steps forward, but Rusty darted down the slope. "Rusty," I yelled. He ignored me, fixated on something below. I scrambled after him, nearly slipping on loose rocks. By the time I got down, Rusty was gone. I heard him barking in the distance. The terrain was so rugged that I couldn't keep up. Rocks cut at my palms. I tripped on roots. His barking grew fainter. When I finally reached the bottom of the valley, I found a shallow creek, half frozen. No sign of Rusty. I spent hours yelling his name, my voice echoing off the cliffs. By late afternoon, assuming it was truly afternoon, I realized I might not see him again. Despair set in as the wind picked up, carrying a metallic smell that made me nauseous. I camped in that valley, in a small clearing near the creek. I felt sick with worry. I told myself Rusty was smart, that maybe he'd circle back. All I could do was huddle inside my tent and wait. Sometime in the night, I heard him whimpering outside. I jumped up, unzipped the tent, and shone my flashlight around. Rusty slunk out from behind a tree. He looked exhausted. I was so relieved that I almost cried. I checked him for injuries, but there were no obvious wounds. However, he felt cold, and something about his eyes seemed off. They didn't have that happy golden retriever sparkle. When I scratched behind his ears, his favorite spot, he barely reacted. Instead, he watched me, silent, head tilted. I tried offering water and kibble. He stared at the bowl, sniffed once, and turned away. He also seemed to avoid the beam of my flashlight like it hurt his eyes. Maybe he was traumatized or disoriented. "It's okay, buddy," I whispered. "It's okay, we'll figure this out." But deep in my gut, I felt a twist of unease, a sense that something had changed in him, or that something was wearing my dog like a disguise. The next morning, or what I called morning, because everything felt scrambled in terms of actual time, I woke up inside my tent to find it unzipped from the inside, but that wasn't what made my breath catch. The sleeping bag next to me was empty. Rusty had gone out again, and he'd unzipped the tent somehow. That didn't make sense. Dogs don't have thumbs. He returned an hour later, creeping in with stiff movements. I tried to check on him, but he backed away. I noticed his eyes were bloodshot. I also found human footprints outside the tent, not from my own boots. They were barefoot, deep in the mud, leading away from the tent and then disappearing near the creek's rocky edge. The prints appeared elongated, as if whoever left them had crooked or extra-long toes. I couldn't piece it all together. I was too tired, too frightened. That was when I met Martin Shaw. I was packing up my soaked, strangely rotting gear. My tent smelled sour even though I'd aired it out, when I heard a voice calling, "Hello there, everything okay?" I nearly jumped out of my skin. A man in his mid-40s came into view. He was about 6 feet tall, lean muscle under a threadbare coat. He had a beard peppered with gray and carried a worn-out rucksack. Around his neck hung a necklace of what looked like deer antler chips, feathers, and some small, round bones that made me shudder. He introduced himself as Martin Shaw and claimed he lived off-grid in this region, a day's hike away. The strangest part was how he'd appeared so quietly. "I saw your dog," he said. "Figured you might need help." His tone was disarmingly casual, but his eyes flickered around, as if taking in every detail. I told him about my disappearing dog, my messed-up maps, the failing electronics. He nodded sympathetically. "This area can play tricks on you," he said. "Magnetic anomalies, old folk tales, all sorts of things. You come in alone?" I admitted I was alone except for Rusty. I realized with a pang of guilt that Rusty was nowhere to be seen at that moment. "He's acting weird," I confessed. He might be sick or hurt." Martin offered to guide me to a fire lookout tower a few miles away, where he sometimes stayed. "It's got some old supplies, maybe a radio." That sounded like salvation. He seemed confident, if a little eccentric. His boots, I noticed, were on the wrong feet. Left boot on the right foot, and vice versa. But I chalked that up to possibly a poor sense of direction or a single mistake. I couldn't be picky. I needed help. We hiked together. I felt uneasy about him, but I was more uneasy about being alone. I told him how I'd lost track of days and how the sky sometimes didn't match my sense of time. He laughed in a gentle, almost fatherly way. "This place does that to you," he said. "If you're not careful, you'll lose hours, or gain them. Why do you think I'm out here? I like living outside time." It was a strange remark, but I thought maybe he was just a harmless hermit. Rusty followed behind us, limping a bit. He wouldn't let Martin get too close. At one point, Martin tried to pet him, and Rusty growled with a deep hostility I'd rarely heard from him. Martin shrugged it off. "It's okay," he said. "Animals know things." A little after midday, we reached what looked like an old, partially collapsed fire lookout tower perched on a ridge. The steps up were dangerously rotted, but Martin insisted it was fine. The inside was a single cramped room with broken windows, scattered debris, and a bunk bed frame with no mattress. The place reeked of damp wood and mildew. On a makeshift table sat a dusty two-way radio, looking older than me. I noticed that carved into the table were random symbols, some triangular shapes, others jagged lines that reminded me of antlers. Martin rummaged through a corner pile of gear. "I'll see if we have any spare blankets," he said. I stood by the table, scanning for anything that might help me call for rescue, but the radio seemed dead, no power source in sight. "Does this work?" I asked Martin. He shrugged. "It used to," he said. "Haven't tried it in years." He fiddled with it for a moment, then smacked the side. Static crackled softly for a second, then silence. Night came faster than I expected. The sun dipped behind the mountains at an odd angle, the sky swirling with pale green and purple streaks I couldn't quite attribute to normal twilight colors. Martin and I built a small fire outside near the tower. I tried to ignore the memory of how my fires had refused to stay lit. This time, it seemed to work. Maybe it was Martin's skill or better luck. Rusty sat a few yards away, eyes reflecting the firelight in an eerie glow. We roasted some of Martin's jerkied venison. My own food supply was mostly ruined or rancid by that point, so I was grateful. The meat tasted a bit gamey, but I was starving. Martin told me he'd been wandering these mountains for a long time, that he used to be a forest ranger but left after conflicts with the agency. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't pry. At some point, my eyelids began to droop from sheer exhaustion. The plan was for me to sleep in the tower. Martin would sleep outside or vice versa. I took the tower so I could keep an eye on Rusty. Martin said that was fine. I gathered my sleeping bag and set it on the old bunk frame. Rusty lay down next to me, but something in his body language suggested deep unrest. Sometime in the night, I woke to Rusty barking frantically. A shadow crossed the tower's window, thin, elongated. I grabbed my flashlight, but it wouldn't switch on. The wind howled, and I heard a scuffle outside, followed by Martin's shout. By the time I forced open the rickety door, I saw Martin collapsed by the dying fire, his leg gashed and bleeding, the remains of a half-burnt piece of wood in his hands. Rusty stood a few feet away, teeth bared, muzzle covered in blood. He let out a feral snarl that made my hair stand on end. In that moment, Rusty looked wild, as if he couldn't remember who I was. I shouted his name. He blinked, as if confused, then bolted into the darkness. Martin groaned. "Your dog attacked me," he said, voice shaking with pain. I grabbed the nearest rag I could find to staunch the bleeding. The wound was nasty, a deep bite on his calf. I tried to help him limp into the tower where I could at least bandage him. Martin was in shock, eyes glassy. "He's not your dog," he kept mumbling. "Not anymore. Something took him." I had no idea what he meant. I remember panicking, thinking I needed to get Martin real medical attention, but how? The next morning, Martin was nowhere to be found. One moment, I was dozing off by his side, worrying about the infection, about how far we were from civilization, and the next moment, I jolted awake to find him gone. The wound on my shoulder from carrying him was sticky with dried blood, but the tower was empty except for me. I realized I'd blacked out again for who knows how long. The sun glared in at a nearly horizontal angle, as though it were still dawn or maybe late afternoon. My watch read 5:47 p.m., my phone read 12. 10 p.m., I wanted to scream. I stumbled down the rickety steps, calling Martin's name, only to find footprints in the mud that led into the woods. They were Martin's boots for sure, but the prints were set in odd intervals, as if he'd been walking on all fours or hopping. Even more disturbing, splattered among the footprints were large dog tracks that matched Rusty's. They were heading away together, Had Martin gone after him? Or had he been led away? I followed for a while, but the trail vanished in a thick patch of forest, with branches overhead so dense they blocked out the sky. The smell of rot was stronger there, so overwhelming I nearly vomited. Searching in the undergrowth, I found scraps of cloth that resembled Martin's shirt. They were damp with something blackish-red and sticky. Then I saw it, a piece of fur, golden fur, clinging to an old stump. It was definitely Rusty's color. There was also something else, a piece of flesh with a chunk of golden fur. Bile rose in my throat. I didn't want to think about what that meant. I staggered back to the tower, terrified and unsure. My gear was still half soaked. My matches were strangely charred, as though they'd burned from the inside out. My food was gone entirely, not just rotted, but missing. I suspected an animal or something else had rifled through my backpack, but the footprints around it didn't look like any animal I recognized. They were large, with elongated toe marks and deep grooves like claws, the same shape I'd seen by my tent earlier. I wanted out, but I had no sense of direction or distance anymore. The mountains could have been 100 miles or 100 feet away for all I knew. The lines of the horizon seemed to warp. The sky flickered from overcast to bright sunlight in minutes. My watch beeped randomly, as if losing battery, then it would beep again. My phone was off. The brand new battery pack wouldn't turn it on. I truly felt disconnected from reality. Night must have come again. At some point, I saw the last light of day fade beyond the ridge. I gathered the remains of Martin's supplies, some stale crackers, a canteen of water, and tried to lock myself inside the tower. There was no actual lock, but I jammed a broken chair against the door. I sat there in near darkness, except for a flickering headlamp that threatened to die at any moment. Every little sound from the woods made me jump. Then, close to midnight, if midnight even meant anything there, the door rattled. I shone my headlamp. Martin stood in the doorway, staring. My makeshift barricade had apparently done nothing. He was silent, but his eyes, God, his eyes were vacant, pupils blown wide as if he was on some powerful drug. He smiled, revealing blood-stained teeth. I stumbled backward. "Martin," I whispered, "where did you go?" He didn't respond. He just took a step toward me, the boards creaking under his weight. I saw a chunk of fur stuck in his beard. The rest of his face was spattered with dried blood. He smelled of iron and decay. I yelled for him to stay back. He took another step. His posture was unnatural, knees bent outward, arms swaying. "Your dog tastes like sweet rot," he murmured, voice cracking. My stomach churned. I reached for the only weapon I had, a small multi-tool knife. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped it. Martin lunged for me with unexpected speed. His mouth opened wider than any normal human mouth could, the jaw unhinging. I slashed wildly, connecting with something. He hissed, rearing back, blackish liquid dripping from his mouth. It smelled like old roadkill in the summer heat. He circled me, letting out a guttural growl. I backed against the bunk frame. My mind screamed at me that this wasn't normal. He'd broken bones in that fall last night, yet he moved as if nothing had happened. Light from my headlamp danced across him, revealing that his leg wound was still open, yet the muscle twitched and wriggled, as though worms were crawling through it. He rushed me again. I managed to throw my sleeping bag in his face, buying me a fraction of a second. I lunged forward, driving the multi-tool blade into the side of his neck. He gasped, then let out an inhuman shriek, almost high-pitched like an elk call. He staggered. I didn't wait to see if he'd recover. I sprinted out the door and into the night. I stumbled through the pitch-dark forest, branches slapping my face, undergrowth tangling my feet. I was sure Martin would be after me, but the only sound was my own ragged breathing. Dim starlight filtered through the canopy. I had no idea which direction I was going. Maybe deeper into the wilderness, maybe not. Eventually, I slipped on a slope and tumbled, rolling over sharp rocks. I landed chest first on a fallen tree trunk the wind knocked out of me. In a daze, I crawled behind the trunk. Pain radiated from my ribs. My headlamp had gone out, and I didn't dare try to fix it. I lay there, panting. My hearing felt painfully sharp. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps crunching leaves. I squeezed the multi-tool, blade open, but no one appeared. The footsteps grew distant, replaced by the wind. I must have blacked out or drifted into a state of half-consciousness because when I opened my eyes, I saw daylight creeping in between the trees. My body was stiff, bruised. My shirt was torn and slick with blood, my own or Martin's, I couldn't tell. I forced myself to my feet, wincing with every movement. The forest around me smelled faintly of pine, but also of rot, like a long-dead animal. The wind whistled through the branches with a voice I could almost interpret as words. My stomach growled painfully. I realized I hadn't eaten more than a few bites in days. I made my way downhill, hoping to find a water source. After an hour of stumbling, I heard the trickle of a stream. I knelt by the water, ignoring the wintry cold, and drank until my teeth hurt. My reflection in the water was horrifying. Pale, haggard, with dried blood caking my hairline. Even worse, I swore I saw movement behind me in the reflection, an antlered shape. I whirled around, but nothing was there. That's when I noticed the remains. At first, it was just a swirl of fur half submerged in the shallows. I crawled closer, stomach twisting. A mangled dog's hind leg, golden fur. My entire body went cold. I recognized the shape of the paw. Rusty had a little white patch on his hind paw from an old scar he got as a puppy. This was definitely him, or part of him. I retched, my tears mixing with the stream water. My best friend was gone, torn to pieces by something, or by Martin, or both. The heartbreak was overwhelming. Part of me wanted to collapse in despair, but something else, older and more primal, compelled me to move, to survive. I stumbled along the stream bank, my mind half gone in shock. Then, about 100 yards ahead, near a fallen pine, I saw movement. A dog-like shape standing on the rocks. My heart pounded. For a split second, I thought, Rusty's alive? But it was impossible. I'd seen his leg. Yet, the shape in front of me had the same golden fur, minus that little white patch. Its head twisted in my direction. In place of normal eyes, I saw something reflective, shining in an unnerving way. The creature bared its teeth in a mockery of a dog's grin. My mind screamed that it wasn't him, that it couldn't be. Still, I froze, uncertain whether to run or move closer. It stared at me for a long moment, then turned and padded silently into the tree line. A wave of dizziness swept over me, as though reality had slipped. Time no longer felt consistent. The sun overhead flickered like a dying light bulb. I heard a slow scraping sound like antlers on bark. The wind carried a voice that whispered my name. I was losing it. Eventually, the land sloped down into a wide ravine, its rocky walls streaked with grayish moss. While climbing down, I saw a battered old wooden sign half buried in the dirt. Fire storage pit. Danger, do not enter. Maybe it was part of some old logging or ranger operation. My thoughts spun. The forest seemed to breathe around me. I felt like a mouse in a maze built by some ancient, malevolent intelligence. Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me. Matthew. It was Martin's voice, but stretched out, as if mocking me. I whipped around, brandishing the multi-tool. Martin's figure stood about 15 yards away. Sunlight filtered through the trees, falling across him in broken patches. His head cocked to one side and he gave a slow grin. "Your dog led me here," he said, voice crackling with something inhuman. He took a step forward. His leg, originally bitten, was bent at an unnatural angle. He didn't seem to feel it. My heart hammered. I scanned the area, spotted the old pit behind me, a gaping hole in the ground about 5 feet across, the edges ringed by half-collapsed wooden planks. Maybe it was once a storage for fire suppression material or a trap. An idea formed in my panicked brain. I lured Martin closer, stepping backward. He advanced with unnatural agility, lips curled in a sneer. "Come on," I murmured to myself. "Come on." Martin lunged. I sidestepped and thrust the multi-tool at his side, grazing him. With a guttural snarl, he staggered, then launched again. I kept moving back, leading him toward the pit. My foot felt the edge of a rotted plank. Martin feinted left, then darted right. He was fast, faster than any injured man should be, but my desperation outmatched reason. I lashed out with a piece of broken plank, catching him across the face. He stumbled, losing his balance, arms flailing. With a crash, Martin fell into the pit, splintering the rotten boards as he went. His scream reverberated, then cut off as he hit the bottom. A sickening crack followed. I peered over the edge. He lay at an awkward angle, limbs twisted. His eyes found me, and a wave of hatred coursed over his slack-jawed face. He tried to move, but I heard bone scraping. Despite that, he still hissed and spat. It was as though something was forcing his broken body to keep going. Without thinking, I grabbed a heavy rock and hurled it down. It landed near his chest. He coughed wetly, blackish spittle leaking from his mouth. He was trapped, crippled. He might have been possessed or turned into something else, but now he couldn't climb up. I backed away, trembling. Tears welled in my eyes. This was a man. I'd just done something horrifying to him. But the rational part of me insisted there was no saving him. He'd become a monster. Or maybe the monster had taken him. Whatever was behind those eyes wasn't the Martin who had first offered help. The entire time he never stopped staring at me. Even as I retreated, he whispered my name in a disturbingly gentle voice. I fled, not knowing where I was going. My only thought, get out of here, get out of these cursed woods. My shoulder throbbed with pain. I realized Martin had bitten me at some point, or maybe that was from the earlier scuffle. My left arm felt weak, possibly from blood loss. My vision blurred. I was sure I was close to passing out, but I trudged onward, propelled by pure survival instinct. After an eternity of stumbling through thick undergrowth, I crested a ridge and spotted a small structure at the base of a slope. At first, I thought I was hallucinating, but as I drew nearer, I saw the outline of a shabby little hunter's shack with a battered roof and a radio antenna protruding from the top. My heart soared. Maybe it was my lifeline. It took me another half hour to navigate down, nearly tumbling over boulders. The shack was unlocked. Inside was a single room with a dusty cot, some ancient supplies, and, most importantly, a ham radio attached to a giant car battery. My hands shook as I tried to turn it on. The first attempt failed. The battery was apparently dead. Then I noticed a small solar panel hooked up outside. I manually jiggled the wires, twisted some knobs. Static crackled through the speaker. I tried broadcasting an SOS. "Hello, please, anybody. My name is Matthew Kane. I'm in the Selway Bitterroot area. I'm lost. I'm injured. Please send help." Over and over, I repeated variations of that, ignoring the dryness in my throat. Eventually, I heard a faint reply. "Matthew, can you hear me?" The voice was crackling, distant, but it was real. Relief flooded me. I told them my approximate location, described any landmarks I could. The person on the other end said they'd alert local authorities. though the signal was weak. "Hang tight," they said. "We'll find you." I nearly collapsed. Help was coming. For the first time in days or weeks, who even knew the actual time, I felt hope. The shack offered minimal shelter, but it was better than the open woods. I scrounged for anything edible and found some ancient canned peaches. I downed them with shaky hands. Then I sank onto the cot, letting exhaustion take hold. I must have drifted off because the next thing I heard was a soft knock at the shack door. My eyes snapped open. My entire body tensed. Another knock, then a whimper. My heart pounded as I recognized the sound. It was Rusty's whimper. Impossible. I'd found pieces of him in the stream, but the whimper repeated, accompanied by scratches at the door. I slid off the cot, wincing at my injuries. My head pounded with each heartbeat, but I forced myself to move quietly. I approached the door and pressed my ear against it. "Rusty?" I whispered. No response, just a faint whining. Maybe I was so desperate that I believed it could be him. My hand trembled on the door handle. I cracked it open an inch, peering outside. There, in the dim light of an overcast sky, stood a golden retriever that looked exactly like Rusty, except there was no scar on the hind paw. It stared at me, wagging its tail once, slowly. My vision swam with tears. Had I gone insane? "Rusty," I managed to say. The dog trotted forward, pressing its nose to the gap in the door. Without thinking, I slammed it shut. My breathing was ragged. This thing. It couldn't be him. I'd seen the remains. Had something taken his form? The whimpering stopped. The door handle rattled, as though tested from the outside, but there was no way a dog could do that. I backed away, knees weak. The creature beyond the door let out a soft, almost human sigh. Then it spoke in a rasping whisper. "It's cold out here, let me in." I clutched my multi-tool, but my mind had nothing left to reason with. I pressed myself against the far wall, praying it would go away. Eventually, the handle stopped moving. Silence crept in. I waited, heart pounding, for minutes or hours. Then I heard something else. Voices in the distance calling my name. Real, human voices. Search and rescue, I forced myself to open the door, stepping outside into a faint drizzle. Trees overshadowed the clearing, but I saw flickers of fluorescent orange gear in the distance. "Here!" I yelled, voice cracking. My legs barely worked, but I staggered towards them, ignoring the fear of what might lurk behind me. 3 people in uniform approached, brandishing first aid kits and flashlights. "We got your signal," one said. "Are you injured?" I nodded, tears of relief streaming down my face. The moment felt surreal. The rescuers led me away. I glanced back at the shack's door, half expecting to see the dog or Martin or something else, but there was only emptiness. They airlifted me out of the wilderness by helicopter. In the days that followed, I was treated for hypothermia, dehydration, infected wounds on my shoulder and arms. I told the medical staff a sanitized version of events. Got lost, was attacked by a wild animal, had to defend myself. They pressed me for details. I deflected as best I could, worried they'd think I was delusional. Authorities asked if I'd seen any other hikers. I admitted I'd encountered someone named Martin Shaw, but had no clue if that was his real name or if he was still alive. They made a half-hearted attempt to locate him, but when weather conditions deteriorated, the official search ended. Rusty's remains were never found. I told them that sometimes dogs run off. That was the only way I could say it without collapsing into tears. Eventually, they discharged me. Katrina visited me once. I saw the fear in her eyes when she looked at me, the cluster of teeth marks scarring my shoulder, and my hollow expression. She didn't ask questions. I think she knew I couldn't handle them. My mental state was fragile, the nightmares vivid. I wish I could say that my story ends there, with me safe in a hospital bed. But there are nights I wake up to the sound of scratching at my door, or a low whimper that sounds too much like Rusty. Sometimes I see a shape outside in the yard, staring through my window, eyes reflecting the moon. And there's a new scar near my ribcage that I never noticed before. A faint line that looks like it was carved by a serrated edge, or maybe by a claw. I can't explain it. In my darkest moments, I remember Martin's final stare in that pit, the creature behind his eyes, the words he hissed. "He's not your dog. Not anymore." I remember the time that refused to flow normally, the shadows that whispered my name, the unnatural glow of the campfire in the night. I remember my sweet, loyal Rusty, and the way that imitation of him tried to speak. I still can't decide what was real and what might have been hallucinations caused by exposure and trauma, but late at night I feel certain I encountered something older than human comprehension, something that hunts in the lonely corners of our world. It devoured my dog, mutilated Martin Shaw's body, and almost claimed me. Whatever it was, it wore their skins like disguises, creeping close under the cover of nighttime illusions and twisted forest trails. I've moved away from Idaho. I have a small apartment in a city far from the mountains, far from towering pines and hidden valleys. I no longer hike or camp or do anything that risks encountering that sense of deep wilderness. I've tried therapy, medication, even spiritual cleansing rituals just to hush the nightmares. Some nights are good. Others, I relive the entire ordeal, hearing snapping twigs and that unearthly hiss. Maybe I'll never know why it chose me. Perhaps I was just a convenient prey. All I know is it's out there, in those dark pine forests, scraping its antlers across the bark. Sometimes, if I concentrate, I can still hear it calling my name. "Matthew, you came out here to die." The wilderness can be a cruel place when it wants to be. And sometimes it's not the wilderness itself, but what lurks in it, waiting for a lost soul, or a lonely dog, or a drifting traveler who thinks they'll find solace among the trees. I didn't find solace, I found horror, and part of me stayed there, tangled in the undergrowth, forever lost in that warped sense of time and reality. If I'm lucky, I'll never go back, but a small voice in my mind keeps whispering that it's not finished with me, that one day I might look outside and see Rusty again, wagging his tail, waiting for me to open the door. And maybe that time, curiosity or misplaced hope will push me to do it. If that day comes, I pray I have the strength to keep it shut, because I know from the moment I fell asleep under that twisted sky, I was part of a game I can't possibly win. And no matter how many miles I put between me and that cursed forest, it only takes one door opening in the dead of night for the wilderness, and whatever hunts there to find me again. My name is Eric Calloway. I'm 32 years old, and everything I'm about to tell you happened in October of 2023. Before this trip, I was just a regular guy from Boise, Idaho, burned out, newly divorced, and sick of staring at my computer screen. I wanted a change, something real that would remind me who I was. I just never expected that search for myself to take me into the worst kind of darkness. I decided on the Bitterroot Mountains in western Montana because the pictures looked stunning. Dense pine forests, sharp ridgelines, crisp autumn air. The perfect place for a man and his dog to find a little peace. My dog, Milo, was my constant companion in the lonely weeks after my marriage ended. He's a 4-year-old German Shepherd, and I'd rescued him from a shelter a year prior when my ex and I thought we could patch our relationship by adding a pet to the household. That obviously didn't work. The one good thing that came out of it was Milo. I'd done a bit of reading, watched some survival gurus on YouTube. I was not some trained outdoorsman, never served in the military, had zero illusions about my limited wilderness skills. But I was determined. I took a week's leave from my remote web design job, loaded up on supplies, a decent first aid kit, brand new boots that cost me more than my rent, and drove out to a rough forest service road near Blodgett Canyon Overlook. I arrived on a chilly Monday morning. The date was October 9th, if I remember right. The air tasted like pine and damp earth. I found a small turnout, parked my battered Jeep, and started hiking up a narrow trail with Milo bounding ahead, wagging his tail like this was the best day of his life. He was excited, I was nervous, but I kept telling myself to relax. People camp out here all the time. The first day went smoothly. The sun was bright, and the wide canyon below looked painted in oranges and browns. I'd carried enough gear to last a week in the backcountry. The plan was simple. I'd set up a base camp, do a bit of exploring each day, write in my journal about the experience, then head home feeling accomplished. Milo and I set up our small tent on a patch of soft ground, about 2 miles off a faintly marked trail. No official campsite signs, but a decent spot with just enough clearing to lay down a tarp. I had a new butane stove and freeze-dried meals. Early in the evening, I made dinner while Milo licked up the scraps. An enormous sense of peace settled over me as the day gave way to dusk. This is exactly what I needed, I thought. I wrote in my journal before bed, October 9th, 2023. First day in the Bitterroots. Milo's having fun, everything's quiet. Feels like I can breathe again. Then I crawled into my sleeping bag, satisfied and looking forward to the rest of the week. Around midnight, I woke to Milo's growling. He was on all fours in the tent, hackles raised, staring at the nylon wall like he saw a threat prowling outside. I fumbled for my flashlight. Heart pounding, I clicked it on and shined it around. Nothing, no sounds but the wind. I tried to calm him. Easy, bud, it's just the forest. But something in his eyes made me uneasy. He wasn't barking at a rustle or a small critter. His stare followed something that I couldn't see. We waited like that for a solid 2 minutes, the tent rustling as I turned to check all corners. Then, abruptly, Milo relaxed, as if the unseen threat had passed. I stepped out with my flashlight, breath steaming in the cold air, scanning the perimeter. Only the wind in the pines. No footprints, no broken twigs. A faint half-moon lit the ridgeline. I ended up blaming it on some dreamlike overreaction from Milo. I climbed back into the tent, hoping that was the end of it. But for the rest of the night, I barely slept. Every time I drifted off, I'd hear what sounded like footsteps circling the clearing. I'd jolt awake, heart hammering, but hear only the breeze. Once, I imagined I heard my own voice calling for help, but that had to be a half-dream, right? The next morning, I emerged groggy but determined. The sun was shining, albeit weakly through grayish clouds. After some oatmeal, I grabbed my handheld GPS to map out a longer hike. That was the first concrete sign something was wrong. My GPS beeped and flickered. It showed a location that didn't match the topography. The device claimed I was near a road, but I knew I'd hiked about 2 miles from any rough roads. I tried restarting it. The display glitched between different coordinates. Milo watched me with his head tilted, oblivious. With a resigned shrug, I tucked the GPS away and pulled out a map. Paper can't glitch, I told myself. Then I noticed the headings on the map didn't seem to match the ridgeline I was looking at in the distance. For a second, I thought maybe I was just reading it wrong. So I studied the canyon shape, traced a route I knew I'd taken, and found the features on paper somehow didn't align with what I was seeing. A ridge that looked prominent on paper was nowhere in sight, replaced by a slightly different horizon. Confused, I scanned for any sign of a hiker or a ranger who could help me get my bearings. The forest was empty. Eventually, I decided to just pick a direction. I'd planned on exploring anyway. I left most of my gear at camp, took some snacks, water, and my phone, and tried to mark my path by memory. Milo trotted at my side. For a while, we followed faint game trails, me taking note of fallen logs, unique rock formations, anything that would help me find my way back. The terrain was quiet, but strangely off. Hard to explain. Every once in a while, I'd step into a cold spot where the temperature dropped abruptly by 10 degrees, or so it felt. Birds called from beyond the trees, but I never saw them. The hush unsettled me. Around midday, we reached a shallow stream. Milo lapped water, wagging his tail like everything was normal. I took pictures with my phone, only for the phone to freeze. The screen turned black. It refused to reboot. "Seriously?" I muttered. I had at least 70% battery when we left camp. I waited a moment, tried again. Nothing. So much for technology. Still, I wasn't panicking. I had some water, a couple of protein bars, and enough sense of direction to get back. I decided we'd head back to camp early, maybe drive into town for a new battery pack or something. That's when Milo took off. I heard a distant rustling behind me, barely more than a leaf brushing the wind. Milo snapped to attention, let out a single bark, and bolted. It happened so fast I barely grabbed his leash. He yanked it out of my hand, bounding off through the trees. I shouted his name, started chasing, but he was too fast. My boots sank in the soft earth, branches whipped my face, and then he was gone. For the next hour, I called out, thrashed through the undergrowth, tore my pants on brambles, twisted my ankles stepping on loose rocks. No Milo. Just more thick pines with no sign of my dog or any reason for him to run. Eventually, out of breath and cursing, I realized I had no idea where I was. My attempts to find him had turned frantic. The sky overhead was dull gray. I couldn't tell if it was still midday or late afternoon. Something about the light felt static, like it wasn't shifting with time. I forced myself to calm down. I cleared my throat and tried to systematically search. Mark the route, circle back. Mark the route, circle back. But no matter how many times I circled, I never found the same landmarks. I'd pass a distinctive mossy boulder, walk a loop, try to come back, and I'd find myself on a slope with a half-rotted log instead. My sense of direction was shot, and I tried not to freak out. "Milo!" I yelled over and over. "Here, boy." The only answer was the echo of my voice. More than once, I swore I heard my voice echo back from a different direction entirely, calling Milo, like it was mocking me. My arms prickled with goosebumps. Finally, after what felt like hours, I stumbled into a small clearing. My legs ached. My phone was still dead. I checked my watch, 2 in the afternoon. That felt impossible. I could have sworn I'd been out searching for a good 4 hours, but the watch only advanced about an hour from the time I'd left camp. Maybe stress was messing with my sense of time. I sat on a fallen log to gather my breath, tears burning my eyes. My dog was out there, alone, or hurt, or worse. For a fleeting second, I wanted to call my ex-wife, just hear a familiar voice. Then I remembered I had no phone signal. Suddenly, the forest felt infinitely large and I felt impossibly alone. I decided the only sensible move was to get back to my base camp. Without a phone, I needed real supplies if I was going to spend the night searching. I limped through the thinning daylight. Half limp, half sprint. My twisted ankle burned with each step, but adrenaline kept me going. The weirdness kept piling up. I'd pass a tree that looked like it had been struck by lightning, split down the middle, blackened edges. An hour later, I'd pass what looked like the exact same tree. Maybe just a coincidence, but it unsettled me. The wind would pick up, and I swore I heard a whisper in it. Something like Eric. I tried to rationalize. The mind can play tricks in stressful conditions. Over and over, I told myself that. By the time I reached what I thought was my campsite, the sky had gone nearly dark, but the watch still read just after 3 p.m. The campsite looked right in some ways. The same slight slope, the ring of stones for a fire pit I'd started building earlier, my footprints in the mud. But the tent was gone. My tarp was gone. My gear was nowhere to be seen. I stumbled around, searching for footprints or drag marks. It wasn't like the wind could blow away a tent. Then, in the dim light, I spotted something hanging from a low branch. Milo's collar. My stomach lurched. How did his collar end up here? It was unbuckled and draped across the branch, almost like someone deliberately placed it there. "Milo?" I shouted, heartbreak creeping into my voice. Silence. I used my flashlight, thankfully that still worked, to scour the area. Beneath the branch, I saw paw prints that led a few feet and just stopped. No sign of a struggle. My dog's collar was unbroken and unscratched, just unbuckled. As if he removed it himself, I thought. That made no sense. I tried to steady my breath. There had to be an explanation. Maybe a bear had come through and spooked him. Maybe the collar got snagged, and Milo pulled free. Maybe someone found him and unbuckled it to check ID. But then, where was the tent? I spun around, shining the flashlight in a circle. For a moment, I glimpsed a shape behind a tree trunk. A human figure. My heart jumped. "Hey!" I shouted. The shape melted back into the darkness. I hurried over, nearly tripping on a root. There was nothing there except pine needles. I pivoted, shining the beam back where I'd come from, and there was my tent, exactly where I expected it, as if it had just appeared. My bright orange tent pitched incorrectly, the poles slightly bent. My tarp was now half buried beneath it. I couldn't believe my eyes. Had I just missed it in my panic? It was so bright and should have been obvious. But the weirdness didn't stop. When I got closer, I saw the tent's zipper was parted, flapping in the faint breeze. Inside, my sleeping bag was spread out, but unzipped from the inside, as though someone had crawled out while I was gone. My stove and half of my freeze-dried packs were scattered across the floor. The flashlight flickered over them. Some of the food was riddled with mold and maggots, as if it had sat out in a hot, humid environment for weeks. Yet, these were brand new packs I'd opened just the day before. My mouth tasted like metal. Fear, confusion. My journal lay open on its spine. I snatched it up. Half the pages were missing, torn out. The last page read, "You can't be alone with yourself. Not here." I recognized my own handwriting. But the memory of writing that? Gone. My hands started shaking. I decided right then to pack up what was salvageable and get out. Screw the pride, the plan, the illusions. But my heart shattered at the thought of leaving Milo behind. I can't just abandon him. I resolved to search for him a few more hours, maybe the entire night if I had to. If I didn't find him by morning, I'd hike back to the Jeep. Maybe he was injured and waiting for me. I checked my phone again, still dead. The flashlight's battery was my only light and it was half drained. I tried the butane stove. It hissed, sputtered, and died. The canister was new, so it shouldn't be empty. The lighter in my pocket clicked uselessly, no spark. The night was silent and cold. I pulled out a spare lighter, same result. No matter how many times I flicked it, no flame. Fire just didn't want to exist here. My watch read 5 p.m. The night was pitch black. I had a horrible, creeping feeling that time didn't flow normally in this place, that the sun was gone, or never existed to begin with. Panicking, I huddled in the tent, holding the flashlight in one hand and my knife in the other. My twisted ankle throbbed, but fear overshadowed pain. I might have dozed off. It was impossible to tell. At some point, I woke to a rustling outside the tent. Immediately, I felt that wave of dread. I tensed, gripping the knife. Through the thin nylon, I saw a shape crouched by the remains of my dead campfire. I took a shaky breath and unzipped the tent door just enough to peer out. "Milo," I whispered, heart leaping. It looked like Milo, same shape, same ears, but he was facing away. His fur seemed unnaturally still, not ruffled by the breeze at all. "Milo?" I repeated. Slowly, his head turned. He blinked at me once. Then, with an almost mechanical movement, he resumed staring at the fire ring. "Oh, buddy, are you hurt?" Fear and relief warred within me. I crawled out, shining the light on him. He made no move, no wagging tail, just stared. My stomach twisted. Something about the angle of his neck seemed off, like it was too rigid. And his eyes— German shepherds have a warm, intent gaze. His eyes were dull, almost cloudy, and he never blinked except for that single time. I moved closer, heart pounding, and reached out my hand. He let me pet his head. The fur felt cold. No reaction, no sniffing. He just stared forward. That's when I noticed the raw skin on his collar area, like an old burn. But his collar had just been on a branch hours ago. I flicked my flashlight across his fur. No blood, no visible injuries, but the energy around him was terrifyingly wrong. I knelt there, tears welling. "Milo, come on, buddy, it's me." His ear flicked slightly. In the faint light, I saw a single drop of dark fluid, blood or something else, dripping from his nose. It plopped onto the cold ashes, sizzling as though it were acid. That was not my dog. Yet, part of me clung to hope. Maybe he was traumatized or in shock. I needed help. I needed a vet. With a trembling voice, I tried coaxing him. "Let's get in the tent, warm up." He followed in a bizarre, stilted gait, like each step was a conscious effort. I was so conflicted, both terrified and relieved to have him back. Inside the tent, we lay side by side. I tried to share my sleeping bag so he'd be warm. He didn't curl up or lie down. He just sat upright. Occasionally, he'd let out a slow pant, but his body never relaxed. Eventually, I must have drifted into uneasy sleep. I dreamed of hearing my own voice outside the tent calling me. When I jerked awake, the flashlight had died. Dawn's weak light filtered in, making everything a sickly gray. Milo was gone. My tent door was unzipped from the inside. My watch read 6 a.m., but from the sky's light it looked more like midday. Or maybe evening? I crawled out, adrenaline surging, ignoring the ankle pain. I scanned for paw prints. I found them leading off into the woods. I grabbed my backpack to check my supplies. Everything was scattered. My freeze-dried meals were covered in black rot, swarming with maggots that wiggled in unnatural patterns. This is not normal decomposition. My canteens were empty, the water apparently evaporated or spilled. And my bag had muddy prints on the inside as though someone had rummaged inside it with filthy hands. Shaking with disgust, I tossed out the spoiled food. That's half my rations gone. I rummaged around to see if anything was salvageable. A couple of protein bars and sealed wrappers seemed okay, until I picked one up and felt the wrapper had been partially eaten through. The bar turned into a sludgy, reeking mass. Furious tears pricked my eyes. What the hell is happening here? This wasn't normal wildlife interference. It was like something wanted me starving. My twisted ankle was swollen, purplish at the base. I wrapped it with an ace bandage from my first aid kit and forced down half a bottle of water. That left me with one bottle left. I had no illusions now. I had to get out. Milo was beyond my help. I didn't even know if that was truly Milo. I'd become convinced something was playing with me, so I folded up my tent in a hurry, ignoring the fact that it was damp and crusted with some weird residue. I crammed it into my pack along with whatever gear seemed intact. Then I set out in the direction I swore would lead me back to the Jeep. I walked for hours, or so it felt. My watch's hands barely moved. At one point, it jumped backward from 9 a.m. to 8:30. My heart hammered in my chest. The forest changed around me. Sometimes I saw glimpses of the canyon. Sometimes I saw only thick groves of pine, sometimes a rocky slope. The trail underfoot kept shifting from dirt to pine needles to loose gravel. I tried to navigate by the sun, but the sun seemed to hover at a strange angle in the sky. I'd stop, rest, limp onward. My ankle flared with pain. I was so desperate that I found myself yelling for help. No one answered. In the late afternoon haze, assuming it was truly afternoon, I heard a bark in the distance. My chest tightened. "Milo," I shouted. Another bark, faint, from behind me. I spun around. I saw no dog, just the empty trail. I kept walking, and then I heard the bark from my left, then from straight ahead. I broke into a clumsy trot, ignoring the agony in my ankle, chasing that bark. Through a cluster of trees across a small stream, the barking sounded closer. Suddenly, a man emerged, a tall, lanky figure in worn hiking clothes, a tattered beanie on his head. I froze, relief warring with distrust. A person, finally. "Hey," he called, raising his empty hands. "It's okay, you alone?" I nodded stiffly, not wanting to reveal too much. "I lost my dog. Did you see a German Shepherd?" He cocked his head. "No, sorry, I only heard barking. Thought maybe you were in trouble." His name, he said, was Tanner Briggs, 38 years old, from Missoula. He had a big old external frame backpack that looked scorched along the bottom edge, like it had been dragged through a fire. His boots were caked in dried mud. "I've been out here a while," he told me. "Had a mishap with my gear, campfire accident. Normally, I'd have found him suspicious, but I was too desperate for any semblance of normalcy. And hey, maybe he was telling the truth." "I'm Eric," I said. "I need to get back to my car. My gear's all messed up, my phone's dead. Something's really wrong here." He smiled sympathetically. "I know, the land's weird out this way." He said it so calmly, as if that explained everything. "Let's head back together, safety in numbers." My paranoia flared, but also safety in numbers was exactly what I wanted. We started walking. He claimed he knew a trail that led to the main road. I explained how my GPS and phone were useless. He just nodded quietly. As we hiked, I noticed something odd. The lines on his face looked wrong for a hiker stuck in the wilderness. His hair was well trimmed, and his breath didn't mist in the cold air. Shouldn't it? He also didn't ask many questions about me, just hummed this low tune under his breath. We paused near a wide rock outcrop. I thought maybe we were taking a break, but he just stared at me for a long moment, smiling too wide, teeth parted like he was enjoying a private joke. My skin crawled, but I forced a smile back. Night fell again abruptly. My watch read 2 p.m. The sky was black. "Doesn't that weird you out?" I asked, gesturing to the darkness. "You see what time it is, right?" Tanner shrugged. "The forest does funny things. Best to not worry about it." Then he rummaged in his bag and pulled out a small LED lantern that flickered with a sickly, greenish glow. "You want to see something interesting?" he asked, that eerie smile creeping back. I hesitated. "What do you mean?" He pointed his lantern a few paces away, illuminating a small circle of pine needles. "Check the ground there." I stepped closer, bracing my sore ankle. At first, I saw nothing but damp soil. Then, as I crouched, I realized the soil was breathing. Little pulses, like the earth itself had a heartbeat. My stomach churned. "What the—" Tanner's voice was right behind me, too close. "The land is old, full of old energies." I spun around. His face was inches from mine and his expression looked hungry. I jerked back, stumbling in alarm. "Man, give me some space." He blinked, stepping away. "Sorry." We continued walking by the eerie lantern light. My mouth was dry, stomach growling. "Tanner, do you have any food?" He paused, rummaged in his pack, and handed me a vacuum-sealed trail bar. The label had a brand name I'd never seen before, with an expiration date from 10 years ago. But the wrapper looked new. I peeled it open. The bar was crumbly and smelled faintly sweet, so I took a cautious bite. It tasted stale, but not spoiled. At least, it was calories. I forced the rest down, eyes watering at the dryness. We walked in silence for a long time. The forest parted occasionally to reveal glimpses of moonlit ridges, but the moon in the sky looked smudged, as if it were behind dirty glass. I kept glancing at Tanner's silhouette, uneasy about the weird vibe he gave off. He'd catch me looking sometimes and grin that too-wide grin. At one point, we skirted a narrow gully, picking our way along the slope. My ankle screamed, and I bit my lip not to whimper. Tanner turned to me, humming. "You need a rest?" he asked. "I'm good," I lied. "Just keep going." But we didn't make much progress. Somehow, the same gnarled tree trunk kept appearing in our path. I recognized its twisted shape, a lightning-split pine with a rotted interior. We must have passed it 3 times. We're going in circles. When I confronted Tanner about it, he just shrugged. "The land is cyclical," he said, as if that explained everything. An hour later, we stumbled into a small clearing. My flashlight caught glimpses of something stacked. Antlers, bones, charred logs, a circle of old sleeping bags all moldy and half-buried. One was bright orange, same model as mine. My pulse hammered as I realized some of the sleeping bags were zipped from the inside out, as if their occupants had turned in their sleep and unzipped from within. The ground here smelled like decay. "Let's go," I muttered, an overwhelming sense of dread washing over me. Tanner hovered, then slowly nodded. We continued along a faint path between thick pines. My nerves were frayed to the breaking point. Suddenly, I heard a bark, Milo's bark, directly in front of us. My heart soared, then froze when Milo actually stepped into view from behind a stump. Under the greenish glow of Tanner's lantern, I could see him clearly. He wasn't wagging his tail. His eyes were the same dull gray I'd seen before, and there was dried blood around his muzzle. "Milo!" I cried, my voice catching. "Come here, boy." He stared at me for a long moment, then glanced at Tanner. My dog's lip curled in a silent snarl. It was as if he was waiting for permission. The hair on my neck rose. "Milo," I repeated, stepping forward. A deep growl rumbled in his chest. He took one slow step backward, eyes flicking between me and Tanner. Tanner's grin widened, stretching too far. "You want your dog? Go ahead." He gestured at Milo, then stepped back. Confused, I inched forward, palm outstretched. "It's okay, buddy. Let's go home." Milo bared his teeth, but he looked uncertain. Then, abruptly, he lunged. I barely got my arm up. His teeth clamped on my forearm, slicing through my jacket and into flesh. Pain and shock crashed over me. I screamed, tried to yank my arm free, but his jaws were locked. Tanner gave a soft laugh in the darkness. Not a normal laugh, but a stuttering, static noise. Blood pooled down my sleeve. In desperation, I grabbed my knife from my belt and slashed at Milo's flank. The blade bit in deep, and with a startled yelp, he released me. He stared at me with betrayal in those dead eyes, whining low. Then he bolted into the woods, limp in his gait, leaving a trail of blood droplets. Tanner broke the silence. Guess he's gone again. The calm tone made me want to vomit. My arm throbbed, blood soaking through the shredded sleeve. I pressed my hand to the wound. "What? What the hell just happened?" I demanded. "Your dog is no longer just your dog," Tanner said cryptically. "There's a presence out here, consumes things, twists them." I stared at him. "What do you know about it?" He shrugged, that nonchalant grin returning. "Enough." I pressed a bandage from my first aid kit against my arm, hastily wrapping it with gauze. My mind raced. How do I ditch this guy? The ground felt slippery beneath me, as if reality itself was trembling. We pressed on in silence for a while until we reached another clearing. Bigger this time. My flashlight beam flickered across the ground and revealed scattered bones. Dozens of them. Animal bones at first glance, but I saw at least one human skull. Its jaw hung open, as though screaming. My stomach lurched and I gagged. Some of the bones moved, rattling faintly. At first, I thought it was an illusion of the light. But no, they twitched and shifted in slow pulses, like they were alive. Tanner moved through them calmly, as if walking on pebbles. "What is wrong with you?" I hissed. He turned back, his eyes catching the glow of the lantern. They looked unnaturally reflective like an animal's eyes at night. "I told you, the land is cyclical. Things don't stay dead, not properly." I picked my way forward, trying not to step on anything. Crack. I accidentally crushed a small femur. A chorus of low moans drifted on the wind, sounding half human, half wind. This was too much. My mind was unraveling. We reached the far side of the clearing, where a ring of large pines formed a partial barrier. Tanner looked up at the largest pine, its trunk scorched. "Almost there," he murmured. "Almost where?" I demanded. He didn't answer. Instead, he produced a battered camera from his pack. Its lens was melted at the edges. He held it out to me, showing me the screen. Static flickered. Then an image formed. Footage of a younger Tanner, smiling into the camera. Date stamped 2012. "I found it buried not far from here," he whispered. "You see the date?" I nodded. 11 years ago. He pressed play. The screen showed him speaking to the camera in a shaky voice, describing how he was lost, how something was hunting him. Then the camera cut out, replaced by a swirling darkness. The next shot was him again, older, the date stamp reading 2019. Then more static, then him again, apparently the same age, date stamp 2023. I stared, mind spinning. "That's impossible." He shrugged. "The forest is cyclical." Then he calmly stuffed the camera back into his pack. We trudged on. My ankle felt like fire, my arm throbbed from the bite, and my head pounded with confusion. Tanner started humming again, that low melody that made the hairs on my neck stand. We finally stopped in front of a collapsed cabin. It looked ancient. Half-burned timbers, rusted metal nails. The door was rotted away, leaving only a dark interior. Tanner said, "Let's rest inside." "I'd rather not," I replied bluntly. He turned to face me with that grin, but now the corners of his mouth split, extending beyond normal human limits. The cheeks pulled back like rotted rubber, revealing gum lines that receded into blackness. "That wasn't a request," he rasped. Fear ignited in my chest. I gripped my knife, stepping back. "Stay away from me." He laughed, voice garbled, stepping closer. "You want to see your dog, right? You want to leave, right? Then come inside." My mouth was too dry to speak. My mind screamed to run, but he was blocking my path. So, trembling, I took a step back into the cabin's open doorway. The floor creaked beneath me. Inside, the smell of wet ash and decay made me retch. Tanner followed, and the doorframe seemed to close behind him as if the forest itself was sealing us in. The interior was unbelievably dark. I pointed the flashlight around, seeing tattered blankets, gnawed bones, and something that looked like an old journal. The pages were burned at the edges. Names. I saw dozens of names scribbled. Then I saw my own name scrawled near the bottom, next to a date that I recognized. October 9th, 2023. Next to it were scribbled words. He belongs to the whaler. I felt a cold presence behind me. Then Tanner's voice in my ear, but it sounded layered, like multiple voices speaking at once. The whaler. It's what you might call a banshee or a demon, but it's older than that. It caught me years ago, made me a vessel, and now it's going to claim you. I spun, slashing blindly with the knife. I felt the blade connect with flesh, heard a wet ripping sound. Tanner hissed. Sparks flicked in the darkness, some unnatural reaction. He stumbled back, and the lantern tumbled from his hand, revealing that his torso was partially opened, hollow, filled with ash and writhing worms instead of organs. I screamed, stumbling back, almost losing my footing on the rotted floor. The presence in the cabin throbbed. The shadows along the walls slithered, coalescing into shapes. For a fraction of a second, I thought I saw my ex-wife's face, her voice calling my name. The shape flickered, replaced by my own voice whispering, "Milo, Milo," like a mocking echo. "Enough!" Tanner, or the thing controlling him, croaked. He lunged at me with unnatural speed, arms outstretched to grab me. In desperation, I pivoted, ignoring the pain in my ankle, and drove my shoulder into his midsection. The rotted floor gave way under our combined weight. We crashed into a hidden crawlspace below the cabin. There was a shriek from beneath us. Something moving in the darkness. My flashlight flew from my hand, clattering away. Dust filled my nostrils. Tanner's body sprawled across from me, limbs bent at wrong angles, yet he continued twitching, trying to stand. I groped blindly until my fingers found the flashlight. It was cracked, but still working, flickering a pale beam across a hidden subterranean room with rough dirt walls. Bones were stacked everywhere, along with old boots, shredded packs, rotted wallets. I realized with horror these were possessions of countless victims over the years. Sobbing, I scrambled to my feet. Tanner was half risen, that grin unwavering despite half his face sheared off, revealing blackness inside. He advanced. Something called my name from deeper in the crawlspace. I flicked the flashlight that way, saw a tunnel leading into darkness. A shape identical to me stood at the tunnel's entrance, eyes reflecting the light. "Eric," it said, voice distorted. "Why did you leave me?" The shape stepped closer. It wore tattered clothes that matched my own, but the jacket was charred. I was trapped. The doppelganger behind me, Tanner in front of me, hissing and spitting black fluid. My mind teetered on the edge of madness. Fight or die? I turned to face Tanner first. He lunged, and I slashed with the knife, aiming for his already damaged torso. The blade sank in and a vile stench erupted. He twisted in agony, shrieking. The cabin above us rattled with the force of that unearthly scream. Suddenly, something latched onto my injured arm from behind, the doppelganger. I felt fingers digging into my flesh, pulling me back. White-hot pain seared through me as I twisted, my arm pinned. I screamed, feeling my bones creak. With a surge of desperation, I let go of the knife in Tanner's body and reached into my pocket for the one thing I still had, a small emergency flare. I yanked off the cap and ignited it. A bright red light filled the crawlspace, nearly blinding me. The doppelganger reeled back, screeching. Even Tanner shielded his hollow face from the glow. Heart pounding, I swung the flare in a wide arc, forcing them back. Sparks showered across the dirt floor, igniting bits of decayed paper and cloth. The entire underground space began to fill with acrid smoke. I hobbled toward an opening I spotted at the far side, a gaping hole in the foundation that led outside, maybe an animal burrow. The creatures shrieked behind me, voices warping, merging. Crouching low, I crawled through the hole, the flare still sputtering in my hand. My ankle felt like shards of glass, but adrenaline propelled me forward. Finally, I emerged into the cold night air. The sky had turned a swirling purple-black. Pine trees towered overhead. I heard the cabin timbers creaking behind me, as if the entire structure was about to collapse. As I crawled away, the whaler's screeches filled the air, blending with the wind. I forced myself upright, half limping, half sprinting into the forest. The darkness pressed in, but I kept the flare for light as long as it burned. I stumbled for what felt like hours. The flare died. I fell repeatedly, scraping my knees, caking my hands in mud and leaves. My head spun with exhaustion and blood loss. My bandaged arm was soaked, and my ankle was near useless, but fear pushed me on. That creeping sense of being hunted never left. Then, abruptly, I saw a flicker of headlights through the trees. My pulse soared. Could it be a ranger, another camper, or was it another illusion? I had to try. I pushed through a line of thick bushes and nearly fell onto a narrow dirt road. Headlights blinded me. A Forest Service truck screeched to a halt. I collapsed to my knees. 2 rangers jumped out. They rushed to my side, helping me up, shining flashlights in my face. "Easy, easy," one said. "You hurt?" I babbled about a monster, about a rotted cabin and a man named Tanner. My words spilled in a frantic mess. The rangers exchanged worried glances. They guided me into the truck, promising to get me to safety. I was so deliriously grateful I didn't even question if this was real. I blacked out. When I came to, I was in a small ranger station, lying on a cot. A paramedic was bandaging my wounds. My watch read 8 p.m. My phone, somehow in my pocket again, was still dead. Another paramedic had my phone plugged into a portable charger, but it refused to show any signs of life. One of the rangers, a stocky woman in her 40s, asked me questions gently. "What day do you think it is? How long were you out there?" I told them it was probably October 12th or 13th. She frowned. "We found you on the evening of the 9th, today. That's maybe a few hours after you left your vehicle." I stared, heart hammering. That's impossible. I felt like I'd been in the mountains for days. No, I stammered. I spent multiple nights. My dog disappeared. I was searching for him for days. The ranger shook her head. "You don't have a dog with you now." I sat up, ignoring the wave of pain. "We have to find him. He might be hurt." She gave me a sympathetic look. "Listen, we'll do a search, but it'll have to be in daylight. The weather's turning." They insisted I rest overnight. They gave me a heavy dose of pain medication for my arm and ankle. My mind reeled. Could it all have been in my head? The injuries were certainly real, though. The bite wounds on my arm, the slash on my forearm, the torn flesh. They couldn't explain that away. The rangers grilled me about a possible bear or wolf attack, but my story about Tanner and a rotted torso just made them look at each other grimly. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured the whaler's silhouette, or heard Milo's bark echoing. My arm stung and my ankle throbbed. By morning, I was delirious with exhaustion. They never found Milo. A 3-day search turned up no sign of him, no footprints, no collar. They also found no rotted cabin, no hidden crawl space, no field of bones or circle of moldy sleeping bags. They did find my campsite, but it was mostly intact. My supplies were messy, but not rotted. The rangers asked if I'd left my gear scattered in a panic. I just stared blankly. Doctors examined me for rabies, gave me stitches, and eventually released me. My ex-wife wouldn't speak to me. Friends called, wanting answers, but I didn't know what to say. The day I got discharged, a ranger swung by to return my phone, which they'd managed to power up. He said it was glitchy, but seemed to function now. Later, alone in my apartment, I turned on the phone. Most apps were blank. Then, out of nowhere, a video file surfaced in the gallery. Dated October 9th, 2023, timestamped 2:00 p.m., the exact time I'd begun searching for Milo. My heart pounded as I opened it. The screen stayed black for a full 10 seconds, then flickered. The camera angle was shaky, pointed at the forest floor. Footsteps crunched. Then I heard my own voice calling, "Milo! Milo!" Over and over, echoing strangely. The camera jerked upward, revealing the shape of my dog in the distance, tail wagging. Then the video cut to static. No matter what I tried, I couldn't delete the file. I stand by my story. Something out there took my dog. Something played with time. I'm left with the torn pages of my journal and the scars on my body. My ankle never healed right. I walk with a brace now, and sometimes on quiet nights I swear I hear Tanner humming that low tune from the darkness outside my window. They say the Bitterroot Mountains are a place of rugged beauty, a place of healing. But I know now there's something else in those woods. Something that hunger for lost souls. Something cyclical, ancient. I don't know if it was a demon, a banshee, or the forest itself. All I know is it hides behind illusions, warps time, and devours everything you hold dear. I'll never go back. Every now and then I call the local rangers about Milo. They politely tell me there have been no sightings. Some nights, though, I hear scratching at my door. A single bark. I open it, find only darkness. Or is there a shape out there, half hidden among the shadows? I don't sleep well anymore, and I doubt I ever will again. My name is David Miller. I'm 33 years old, and this happened in October 2023 in the Black Hills of South Dakota. I've often replayed each day in my mind, each hour, wondering if there was a moment I might have turned back or done something differently. Looking back, it's hard to tell what was real, what was illusion, and what might still be haunting me. But I'll try to explain it all as best I can. I'm not a veteran or anything like that, just a burned-out software engineer who decided to reconnect with nature. Before all this happened, I worked long hours at a tech company in Omaha. I had suffered from insomnia, anxiety, and an unshakable feeling that my life had slipped out of my own hands. I'd recently ended a relationship that left me more isolated than ever. Everyone kept telling me I should get some fresh air and get away for a while. So that's exactly what I did. I planned a 5-day solo camping trip in the Black Hills National Forest, specifically near Black Elk Peak, and I brought my golden retriever Luther for company and protection. The plan seemed straightforward. I'd drive out from Omaha, set up a small base camp in the forest, and spend my days hiking and breathing in the clean air. No phone calls from clients, no push notifications, no more burning my eyes out on code. Just me, my dog, a tent, and a pocket full of dreams about returning to a simpler state of mind. I should have known better, though. The world is never as simple as we hope, and something in those woods had plans of its own. Day 1 began normally enough. The drive from Omaha to South Dakota took about 7 hours, a patchwork of farmland and open sky that gradually gave way to rolling hills and pines. Luther rode in the passenger seat with his tongue hanging out, excited for new scents and open space. I remember feeling a warm sense of calm just watching him stick his nose out the crack of the window. ears flopping back. I thought about how I'd finally doze off in my sleeping bag under the stars, lulled by the hum of crickets. That image kept me going. By late afternoon, I arrived at a small clearing near a trailhead that led up toward Black Elk Peak. Officially, the peak was about 7,200 feet high, an iconic spot in the region. I didn't want to camp near the busiest trails, so I chose a less traveled area. I parked, loaded my backpack with supplies, made sure Luther's collar was secure, and trudged into the forest. The air smelled of pine needles and damp earth. Beneath the canopy, sunlight formed shifting patches on mossy rocks, and the wind carried a distant hush, like a whisper you can't quite interpret. I set up my tent in a flat, pine-carpeted patch near a small stream. I tested my phone, barely a single bar of signal. That was fine. I wanted to unplug anyway. I made a small fire pit, gathered some dry wood, and let Luther wander around sniffing everything. He seemed happy, tail high, occasionally coming back to nudge my arm or lick my hand. After everything I'd been through in my personal life, it felt like a balm. This was the reset button I'd needed. It was still light out, so I decided to take Luther for a short walk before dinner. We followed the stream, discovering a few deer prints in the mud. Luther perked up and tugged on the leash when he caught their scent. The forest felt peaceful, idyllic even. When we returned to camp, I started a fire. To my surprise, it crackled for a moment and then burned with a momentary flash of deep green. I told myself it was just some chemical in the wood, maybe copper residue or something similar, but it made me uneasy. In that second, the forest looked darker, and the shadows around me lengthened as though they had moved closer on their own. The flicker of green disappeared almost as soon as it started, replaced by the familiar orange glow of flame. I shook off the discomfort and fed Luther some of his dog food, then heated water for my freeze-dried meal. Later that night, as I crawled into my sleeping bag, I remember the smell of smoke and pine drifting through the slight gap in my tent's rainfly. Luther curled up next to me, chin on his paws, eyes half-lidded but watchful. Despite how tired I was, it took a while to drift off. Maybe it was the new environment or the break from routine, but my brain wouldn't shut up, reliving old arguments with my ex, worrying about software updates I'd left undone. At some point, I jerked awake from a dream I couldn't remember. My heart pounded. Luther whined softly. Straining to listen, I caught a faint noise, almost like someone exhaling slowly just outside the tent. Maybe it was the wind or a deer rummaging for food. My mind spun with paranoid images, a mountain lion, a bear, a trespasser, but nothing disturbed the fabric of the tent. Eventually, I forced my eyes shut and managed to get some rest. Day 2 started earlier than I intended, with me sitting bolt upright in my sleeping bag, eyes snapping open to the strangest sensation. Something felt off with my bedding. When I looked down, I noticed a handful of pine needles inside the bag, spread around my legs. It might not sound like a big deal. Campsites always have stray debris. Except I had zipped myself in tightly, and I'm a fairly restless sleeper. If I had carried in pine needles, they'd probably be near the tent's entrance or on top of the bag, not scattered inside it. The weirdest part was that they didn't look crushed or pressed down at all, as if they'd been carefully placed after I got into the bag. A chill rippled through me. Luther nudged me. He seemed okay, but his hackles rose. He gave a short, low growl at the tent door. At first, I assumed he smelled another animal. I unzipped the flap to let him out for his morning routine. The morning light filtered through the pines in gentle rays. Nothing looked out of place, except the lingering smell of burnt wood from last night's fire. I got out of the tent, discovered my campfire had snuffed out completely. The fire ring I'd built was cold to the touch, which was strange because I'd banked the coals before bed. There should have been a little warmth left, but I shrugged it off. Fire can go out in the night, especially if the wood is damp. I busied myself with collecting kindling to reignite it for breakfast. While I was rummaging through my gear, I realized my phone battery was nearly drained, even though I'd shut it off before sleeping to conserve power. Maybe the phone was old and the battery was failing, or maybe I'd messed up and not actually turned it off. I tried turning it on, and it started glitching, flashing random lines of code-like text, the date switching from October 10th to October 8th. Even the time was off, flickering back and forth by minutes. I felt a pang of unease. My phone wasn't brand new, but it had never done that before. I plugged it into my portable battery pack, hoping it would hold some charge, then went to check my small GPS device. The GPS device had no reading at all, as if it couldn't connect to satellites. I climbed a slight rise in the terrain to get a clearer view of the sky. Still nothing. The glitch persisted for half an hour before a faint signal returned, showing me at a latitude and longitude that, as far as I knew, was correct. But the altitude readout was jumping between 6,500 and 7,100 feet. I made a mental note to keep the device in my pocket from now on. Even with an unexplainable glitch, I figured it would be safer to rely on it than not. While all this was happening, Luther suddenly took off into the trees. He's a golden retriever with boundless energy, but this seemed different. A frantic dash rather than playful bounding. I shouted after him, left my half-built breakfast behind, and ran. My heart hammered. My boots slipped on damp leaves. I managed to follow him for a couple hundred yards, and I caught a glimpse of his golden tail as it swished around a bend in the trail. Then he vanished behind a thick wall of pine. I sprinted forward, calling, "Luther, hey buddy, come back." My voice sounded almost swallowed by the trees. No jangle of his collar, no barking. Silence. Fear coiled in my stomach. You hear stories of dogs chasing deer and vanishing, but Luther was usually obedient. For him to bolt like that made no sense. I tried to keep track of my location, but every step deeper into the forest brought me new anxieties. Would I get lost? Would I lose my campsite? Eventually, I reached a small clearing. The silence was overwhelming. The hair on the back of my neck prickled. I scanned the area and saw no sign of Luther. In the quiet, a single sound emerged. A whimper, distant yet distinct. I couldn't locate its source. It might have come from the north, near a cluster of boulders. I hustled that way, but the whimpering stopped. At that point, I knew I might waste the entire day searching if I didn't plan carefully. I hurried back to camp to mark the area on the glitchy GPS and gather more substantial gear. Snacks, water, and something to mark the trees with if I had to create a trail of breadcrumbs. Hiking back to camp, I felt a presence behind me, as if someone were following. Twigs snapped in the undergrowth. The sense of being watched put me on edge, but when I turned, there was only a flicker, some shape half hidden by branches. I had the brief impression of a figure in dark clothing, staring silently. Then it was gone. My mind reeled, and I tried to rationalize it as just a trick of the light. Yet the sound of footsteps, or paw steps, persisted at random intervals, never fully matching mine. I half-jogged the rest of the way, panting by the time the bright orange of my tent came into view. Oda. When I returned to camp, I nearly ran into someone. A woman with short auburn hair was standing in my campsite, examining my unlit fire pit. She was wearing boots and a sturdy jacket, looking every bit the seasoned hiker. I froze for an instant, adrenaline coursing through me. Her eyes snapped up, startled, and she placed a hand on her chest as if to steady her heartbeat. "Who the hell?" I stammered. "Sorry," she replied. I didn't mean to startle you. I'm Olivia Hayes. But my friends just call me Liv. I saw your tent and wanted to ask if you've seen anybody else around here. I thought I heard someone shouting." Her demeanor didn't strike me as threatening, but it was definitely odd to find someone just standing in my camp. She seemed calm, maybe too calm. "My dog took off," I said. "Golden retriever named Luther. I was yelling for him." "Are you alone?" Her expression softened. "I'm alone, yes. I've been hiking these trails for a while. I'll keep an eye out for your dog if you like." Actually, I thought I saw a flash of gold fur a bit northwest, heading towards one of the ridges. I exhaled, relieved to have at least a possible lead. I introduced myself properly. "I'm David Miller." She gave me a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Liv helped me gather my gear. We formed a quick plan. We'd search a perimeter around the camp, then expand outward. If we still didn't find Luther by evening, we'd set a bigger fire to make it easier for him to smell or see us from a distance. I was grateful for the help. I hated the idea of losing Luther in these woods without anyone to lean on. Over the next few hours, we roamed trails branching off from my campsite. We found footprints that might have belonged to a dog, but they soon faded in the patchy ground cover. We occasionally called out for Luther, with no response. We did stumble across a small abandoned ranger station deep in the forest. Its door was padlocked and a window broken. I pressed my face against the glass, my eyes adjusting to the dim interior. Faintly, I made out old signs, a toppled chair, and a thick blanket of dust. It looked like it had been unused for years. While we stood there, Liv mentioned that she had visited Black Elk Peak before. Her tone was casual, but there was a certain heaviness to her words. "The Black Hills can be tricky," she said. "They say time works differently here, that the land can take back what it wants." I shuddered. Something about the calm finality of her voice unnerved me. I tried to pry for more details. "They say, who's they?" But she deflected, changing the subject to how we might circle back toward my tent before it got dark. By twilight, we had found no trace of Luther besides a single paw print in some soft soil, which might have been his or another dog's. Tension strung me tight. My stomach growled, and my mouth felt parched, but I didn't have much appetite. We returned to camp defeated, half expecting that Luther might have found his way back on his own, but he wasn't there. As Liv and I set up a fire, a cold wind whipped through the pines, carrying a faint, distant whistle. It sounded almost human. Liv froze, eyes narrowing, like she recognized something. She looked at me for a moment, then forced a tight smile. "Probably the wind," she said. But her expression told me she wasn't so sure. I tried to get some rest, though I spent the night in a state of semi-wakefulness, hoping to hear Luther's familiar shuffle outside my tent. Instead, I heard footsteps at odd intervals, a soft crunching of pine needles that seemed to circle the camp. Liv was in her own small tent about 30 feet away. I wondered if she heard it too. Day 3 brought the first real signs that something was seriously off with time itself. It started with my watch. I'd set it by the car clock before I left, and I typically wound it at night. Now, it insisted it was Monday, October 9th, even though I was sure it was Wednesday, October 11th. At first, I blamed myself. I must have forgotten to wind it, or maybe I'd changed the date accidentally. But when I looked at my paper journal, the pages with my own handwriting insisted that yesterday had been October 10th. I stared at the discrepancy for a good minute, my chest tightening. The rational part of me said, "Relax, you just messed up the date." The paranoid part wondered if I was losing my mind. It got worse when Liv noticed that her own phone was marking weird date shifts too. "It says 8:42 a.m. on Tuesday," she said, turning the screen toward me. "But I swear it was showing Wednesday last night." "That's exactly what mine's doing," I replied. We exchanged concerned looks. Part of me worried about electromagnetic interference or some sort of phenomenon in these hills. Or maybe we'd stumbled across a strong local legend that was messing with us psychologically. Regardless, it made me double down on finding Luther and getting out soon. The place felt oppressive, as if the air was heavier with every breath. We got another shock that morning. Our supplies had turned to absolute garbage overnight. The few perishable items I'd brought, like some vacuum-sealed meats, were foul, as if they'd been left out to rot for days. My bread was spotted with mold, and my water filtration bottle had greenish algae stains on the inside. This was only day 3. There was no reason for everything to degrade that fast. Liv said some of her energy bars tasted rank, and the plastic packaging was brittle and cracked. We ended up tossing most of it. We still had some freeze-dried meals that seemed usable, and we rationed them carefully. More unsettling than the rotting supplies were other bizarre details around camp. Our sleeping bags were unzipped from the inside, as if someone had rifled through them while we slept. Our flashlights were missing. Liv eventually found hers submerged in the stream behind a rock. Mine was never found. Our backpacks had been dragged across the campsite, leaving streaks in the dirt that ended abruptly. No footprints, no explanation. I half wondered if a bear or some scavenger had come, but it was also methodical. While I was inspecting the mess, I heard a short bark echo from the tree line. My head snapped up. "Luther!" I yelled. Liv and I raced toward the sound. The bark came again, fainter. We tore through a thicket of brush, and on the other side stood a shape in the shadows. It looked like Luther, golden fur, tail wagging slowly. Relief and confusion washed over me. I tried calling him, clicking my tongue. He stood there, not blinking, not moving, not running toward me. He was statue still. "Luther?" I said, stepping closer, heart pounding. Something about his stance was wrong. The tilt of his head was too stiff. Then he emitted a low, breathy whine that sounded layered, almost like two voices. Despite every instinct telling me to proceed cautiously, I hurried forward, tears burning in my eyes, shouting his name. Liv grabbed my arm. "David, don't!" she hissed. I froze in confusion. The dog raised its muzzle slightly as if tasting the air, then turned and ambled deeper into the forest. It wasn't exactly how Luther moved, more like a pantomime of it. I watched, torn between elation that he was alive and horror at the uncanny way he carried himself. Liv's grip tightened and I felt the tremble in her hand. "That's not your dog," she whispered. I've seen something like this before." "Like what?" I demanded, but she just shook her head. As the dog shape receded into the gloom, I struggled to follow, but Liv insisted we hang back. "We can't just let him wander off," I snapped. She swallowed hard. "If it's really Luther, it'll come back. If not, we need a plan." Eventually, I overcame my emotions enough to realize Liv was right. Something was very, very wrong here. The day that followed was a strange dance of searching for Luther, trying to keep ourselves safe and grappling with the sense that time itself was unraveling around us. Liv revealed bits and pieces of her past in anxious fragments. She once had a sister who vanished in a national park, never found. The search parties turned up nothing, she told me. One day of looking turned into 3, then a week, and eventually we lost all track of time. It's like the forest swallowed her. I couldn't tell if she was confiding or warning me. Day 4 was the day I realized just how deep the rot went. I woke up in the early dawn light, only to find that the partial bag of dog food I'd left out for Luther's return had literally turned black and gooey, as if left in a swamp for months. My entire sight stank of decay. Liv emerged from her tent looking pale. She said she'd heard chanting in the night. I told her I heard footsteps circling us. Neither of us got any sleep. She helped me check the perimeter of our campsite. That's when I saw the footprints. They were shaped like bare human feet, except elongated and twisted at odd angles, with claw-like impressions at the toes. My blood ran cold. When I pointed them out, Liv tried to hide her reaction, but I saw her jaw tighten. "We should leave. This is dangerous," she said. "We can't leave Luther," I insisted. I felt a twinge of guilt and desperation. She sighed and nodded, but I could see she was terrified. We decided to do a broader sweep of the forest area near the abandoned ranger station, both to look for clues about Luther and to see if maybe it connected to a main trail that could lead us to safety. My aim was to find my dog and then get the hell out of there. A few hours into the hike, we stumbled across a circle of stones hidden in a dense grove. Some were carved with symbols I didn't recognize, spirals, stick figures, and geometric patterns. It smelled faintly of rot, the same odor plaguing my camp. At the center of the circle stood a small cairn of rocks. There, I saw something that nearly made me vomit. Tattered clothing, old bones that might once have been animal, or... I swallowed back the nausea. Among the debris, I spotted the bright red handle of my missing flashlight. I snatched it, hand trembling. The plastic casing was cracked as if someone had stomped on it. I felt an oppressive presence in that circle, as though unseen eyes were scanning us. Liv urged me to leave, her voice quavering. But I noticed a trail of paw prints leading away from the circle. Paw prints with the exact shape of Luther's. Or so I thought. In my desperation, I followed them. They led us to a place I still have difficulty describing. A slight slope covered by dense evergreens, with a scattering of boulders forming a sort of clearing. There, half concealed behind a boulder, I saw something that made my heart skip. A tent, identical in color and style to mine, ripped to shreds. And inside it was... me. I know how insane that sounds, but there was a corpse that looked exactly like me. The body wore my jacket, the same brand and color. The face was partially decayed, skin stretched taut over cheekbones. Eyes gone. My own eyes were gone. The lips were peeled back, revealing yellowed teeth and a horrible rictus grin like a silent scream. The worst part was the smell. A sickening, sweet stench. Flies buzzed around the remains. My voice caught in my throat and I stumbled back, collapsing onto the ground. Liv hovered at the entrance, eyes wide, a hand clamped over her mouth to stifle a scream. I tried to speak, but no words came. Finally, I managed to choke out, "What is this? Whose body?" She just shook her head. "We have to go. We have to go right now." Yet she didn't move, transfixed by the sight. Then something moved behind the corpse. A tall, gaunt silhouette, half concealed in shadow. My entire body stiffened and I couldn't swallow. I caught the faint reflection of eyes, pale, hollow eyes, watching me from behind the shredded tent fabric. There was a clicking sound, like a tongue clicking inside a mouth. The figure leaned forward, revealing an elongated face, a monstrous fusion of bestial and human features. It seemed to grin at us, or else that's how I interpreted the bearing of those crooked, discolored teeth. Liv grabbed my wrist, yanking me away. We ran. Branches whipped my arms and snagged my clothes as we bolted through the undergrowth. Our breath was ragged, minds reeling with disbelief and horror. At one point, I nearly lost my footing on a slope, sending us both skidding a few feet. We scrambled up again, ignoring the scrapes and bruises. We just needed to put as much distance as possible between us and that abomination. By the time we found our way back to my campsite, the sun had lowered behind the trees. We collapsed onto the ground. My chest felt like it was on fire. Liv looked as though she'd seen hell itself. I crawled to my tent only to find new horrors. The tent flaps were already open, though I'd closed them before leaving. The interior reeked of wet fur and something sweetly rotten, like decayed fruit. Liv started rummaging in her own tent, searching for a hatchet and any other tool that could serve as a weapon. Meanwhile, I tried to gather my scattered gear. That's when I saw Luther again. He was standing at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the flickers of our dying campfire. I froze. Slowly, I rose to my feet. "Luther," I called in a trembling voice, tears threatening to surface. He didn't move, tail still, muzzle angled slightly, eyes empty, and yet a weird calm settled over me, as if seeing my dog again was too good to question. I took a step closer, tears spilling. "Hey, boy," I choked out. Liv hissed at me, "David, don't look at him." I looked. With a surge of adrenaline, I realized what she meant. He wasn't blinking, he wasn't breathing. His chest remained completely still. That bizarre, layered whine echoed once more, seeming to come from everywhere at once. I remembered the horrifying grin on that figure behind the shredded tent. In a moment of reckless desperation, I approached anyway, arms outstretched, voice shaky. "Luther," I repeated. The dog cocked his head, then parted his jaws. A sound emerged, like the grinding of bones. My stomach lurched. Suddenly, it charged at me. I stumbled backward, calling Liv's name, but the dog skidded to a stop a few feet away, then snapped its jaws in the air. Up close, I saw the eyes were not Luther's. The irises were a milky, ghostly color, and black fluid wept from the corners. Liv grabbed the hatchet and positioned herself between me and the thing wearing my dog's skin. For a brief moment, it seemed uncertain, as if measuring us. Then it hissed, revealing far too many teeth. Something about its entire jaw structure was elongated. I saw Liv's eyes flicker with determination. She lunged forward with the hatchet, and the dog thing leapt away, baring teeth in a silent snarl. In that moment, it shifted its posture in a human-like fashion, rearing up on hind legs for just a second, as though the bones inside it didn't belong to a canine. I gagged at the sight. Then it darted off into the dark, leaving us trembling. Liv exhaled shakily, tears in her own eyes. I realized I was hyperventilating, my entire body trembling. We clung to each other, fear thrumming through our veins. It was a long while before we could speak. Finally, she whispered, "I told you, that's not your dog." We spent that night in half-delirious terror. Sleep was out of the question. We put our backs against a large pine trunk, the hatchet in Liv's hand and my pocket knife in mine. The fire we tried to build kept going out almost immediately. The small flames that would spark up had an eerie greenish tinge, like the one I'd seen on the first night. Every time the fire died, the dark seemed to press in with the weight of a living thing. Somewhere around midnight, I heard Liv muttering to herself. She was rocking gently, eyes unfocused. I touched her shoulder, and she seemed startled, like she'd momentarily forgotten I was there. "David," she whispered, "if we don't get out of here soon, we won't get out at all." I nodded. Fear kept me silent. In my heart, I knew she was right. Toward dawn, exhaustion took hold. I slumped over for what must have been a micro-nap, only to snap awake at the sound of a crunch in the dirt nearby. I jerked upright, clutching my pocket knife so hard my knuckles turned white. No new intruders were visible, but Liv was gone from my side. For a few seconds, my panic soared. Had something taken her while I dozed off? I scanned the clearing. She was standing about 20 feet away near a dying patch of embers, unmoving. Relief flooded me, but then I noticed her posture was rigid, and she was just staring at the ground. "Liv," I croaked. She didn't turn. She mumbled something I couldn't catch. I edged closer. Her gaze was fixed on a charred piece of wood in the fire ring, as if hypnotized. "Liv," I repeated, touching her shoulder. She flinched and turned to me, eyes wide. The look she gave me was empty. Then she blinked a few times, like waking from a trance, and forced a small smile. "Yeah, sorry," she said. "Just spaced out for a moment." Her voice felt hollow. Alarm bells went off in my head, but I didn't want to lose the only companion I had left. I tried to brush it off. Day 5 arrived with a bleak sense of finality. My phone was dead. My GPS device blinked nonsense. My sense of direction was warped. Liv insisted we needed to find a main trail or a road. "We're losing time," she said. I no longer bothered to argue about Luther. A small voice in me whispered that maybe there was nothing left of my real dog anymore. We packed what little gear we had: some freeze-dried meals, water, a hatchet, a pocket knife, and a first aid kit. I had to stifle a gasp when I realized that the water in our canteen smelled rancid. We filtered some stream water, hoping it would be safer. Then we left camp behind, an odd sense of farewell nagging at me. It didn't take long for us to realize we were going in circles. Despite the map, despite the compass, the terrain refused to match what we saw. One moment, we'd crest a small hill, expecting to see a valley or the ranger station. Instead, we found ourselves back at the stone circle, or near that rotted cairn we'd discovered the day before. Liv started muttering under her breath again, the same repetitive phrases. "We can't leave, we can't leave." Then she'd catch herself and say, "We must leave. We must." Like her mind was torn in two directions. At midday, we heard a bark. My heart lurched. Up ahead on the path stood Luther. Once again, absolutely still, that same eerie, unblinking stare. I looked at Liv, but she had a vacant expression. A moment later, she turned and walked away from me without explanation, heading toward a dense patch of trees. I panicked, yelling after her, "Where are you going?" She didn't answer. She disappeared among the pines. Shouting her name, I followed. But my foot snagged on a root, sending me sprawling onto the ground. By the time I scrambled to my feet, Liv was nowhere to be seen. Then I heard the whimper, so I decided to chase after that instead. It led me away from the pines, down a small slope into another clearing. As I approached, the smell of decay and damp earth nearly overwhelmed me. A breeze rustled the trees, carrying an undercurrent of rotting leaves. The whimpering sounded heartbreakingly familiar. Luther's distressed cry. I drew my pocket knife and crept forward. If it was the real Luther, I had to help him. If it was that thing again, well, I wasn't sure what I'd do. The trees parted to reveal a peculiar sight, a stone circle, but a different one than we'd seen before, larger, ringed with totemic shapes. In the center sat my dog, or what appeared to be my dog, hunched as though in pain, muzzle buried between his paws. His fur was matted with mud or something darker. He whimpered again, and my heart twisted. I stepped closer, tears in my eyes. "Luther, it's okay," I croaked. He raised his head, blinking, looking disoriented. My hopes soared. He seemed more present. He wagged his tail weakly, inching forward on trembling legs. I was about to drop my knife and rush to him when I spotted a shape behind him. Liv, crouched and silent, eyes shining with a strange intensity. She was smiling, a too wide smile that made my blood run cold. Her lips parted, revealing teeth flecked with something dark. She gave a soft chuckle. "Liv?" I asked in a trembling voice. She rose from her crouch, hatchet in hand. Her gaze drifted toward Luther, then to me. "Look who's here," she said in a sing-song tone that wasn't at all like her. "We've been waiting." My mind screamed that something was horribly wrong. She stepped closer, hatchet glinting in the muted light. Her eyes were vacant, as though the real Liv had been pushed aside. My dog let out a pitiful whine, scooting away from her. I realized then that Luther seemed truly terrified of her. That gave me a sliver of hope. Maybe it really was him. I raised my knife, my voice quavering. "Liv, put down the hatchet. We can leave together." Her lips curled in a snarl. "No," she said, voice layered, reminiscent of how the dog's bark had sounded. "You don't leave. You never did." Her eyes darted to Luther. That one almost left, but we brought it back. My entire body shook with adrenaline. I tried to speak, to say something that might break the spell, but words failed me. She lunged with the hatchet, swinging at my torso. I narrowly dodged, stumbling over a stone. The blow missed me by inches. She came at me again, this time the blade scraping my arm, sending a jolt of pain down my side. Panic seized me. In that moment, Luther, who had been cowering, sprang toward her in a desperate move. He latched his teeth onto her jacket sleeve, trying to pull her back. She shrieked, a guttural sound, and jerked the hatchet free, slicing at him. Blood sprayed across the stones. "No!" I roared, rushing forward. I drove the pocket knife into her side, not even thinking. Just pure instinct to save Luther. She hissed, dropping to one knee, but her strength was terrifying. She yanked me down with her free hand. We grappled in the dirt, the hatchet dangerously close to my face. I felt her breath on my cheek, smelled a sickening odor coming from her mouth. I pushed against her, summoning every bit of will I had left. Then she twisted with inhuman agility, managing to swing the hatchet at Luther. The blade caught him in the neck. His yelp of pain stabbed my heart. Rage exploded inside me. I slammed a rock into her head. She reeled, blood trickling down her temple. With trembling hands, I did it again, tears streaming down my face. She collapsed onto her back, half laughing, half choking. "It's never over," she spat, voice distorted by something that wasn't her. The hatchet fell from her grip. I scrambled to Luther's side. He was panting, blood matting his fur. I tore off part of my shirt and pressed it against the wound. He whimpered, licking my hand weakly. My mind raced. Could I save him? Then, just beyond Luther, I saw Liv beginning to stir. Her eyes rolled back, but she was still alive. She coughed up blood, managing a twisted smile. "You'll bring it back," she rasped, voice watery. Her eyes drifted shut, and she stopped breathing. I don't know if she died from her injuries or if the thing controlling her simply left her body, but she was gone. I tried everything I could for Luther, but the wound was deep, and there was too much blood. He gazed at me with dimming eyes, muzzle quivering. "I'm sorry," I whispered over and over, tears sliding down my cheeks. He gave a soft final whimper, then went still. I was alone now, truly alone. I must have wandered for hours with no sense of direction. My compass spun uselessly, and my mind spiraled into shock. Time lost all meaning. I walked until my legs threatened to give out, then forced myself to keep going. The forest seemed endless, and the shadows stretched in unnatural ways. Occasionally, I heard distant voices calling my name in mocking tones. Some sounded like Liv, some like my ex-girlfriend, some even like my own voice. I refused to answer. Eventually, I noticed a faint trail that I hadn't seen before. It led me through a rocky pass that rose above the dense pines, giving me a partial view of the horizon. By some miracle, I spotted an old forest road snaking through the hills far below. Summoning the last of my will, I pushed toward it, sliding down embankments and stumbling over loose stones, ignoring my aching limbs. That night, I slept only in fits, haunted by images of Liv's contorted face and the time I found a body that looked just like me in that shredded tent. I'd jerk awake every few minutes, certain that creature was standing over me. The nightmares and reality blurred. Sometimes I dreamt that Luther was alive, nuzzling me awake. I'd reach out to pet him, only to watch him melt into black ichor. The next morning, I continued downhill until I saw a sign. It was battered, covered in moss, but it read, "Trailhead 0.5 miles." Hope flared in my chest. Half a mile. I trudged forward, fighting dizziness and exhaustion. At the trailhead, I found a more well-worn path that looked like it might lead to an actual ranger station. Sure enough, after maybe another hour, I stumbled upon 2 park rangers performing some routine check of the area. At first, they didn't notice me. I waved my arms weakly and collapsed. One rushed over, radioing for help. My memory is hazy after that, but I recall them asking my name and me mumbling, "David Miller, from Omaha. Help me." They whisked me to a small medical outpost, then eventually to a nearby hospital. When I came to, an IV was in my arm, my body stiff and battered with bruises and cuts. A nurse was fussing over me. "You're lucky," she said, scanning my vitals. "The park rangers said you'd been out there for quite a while." I blinked, trying to clear the fog. "How long?" I croaked. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "They didn't say exactly. Are you sure you're David Miller?" "Yes," I managed. "Why?" She exchanged a glance with another nurse. "Because the Rangers said they picked up a David Miller earlier this year too, claiming something similar," she answered gently. My heart seemed to stop. My skin turned clammy. Before I could press her for details, the doctor entered with more questions. I stayed in the hospital for a few days, drifting between uneasy sleep and half-coherent attempts to explain what happened. The staff mostly chalked it up to severe dehydration, exposure, and stress-induced hallucinations. They found no signs of trauma consistent with monsters. Liv's body and my dog? Never recovered, they said. And apparently, there had been no official record of a woman named Olivia Hayes with a permit to camp in that area, nor any missing persons file matching that description. They did let me keep my personal effects, including my small journal. One morning, while flipping through it, I froze. Several pages near the back had writing in my own hand, entries dated October 12th and October 13th, describing events that hadn't happened yet. The text was cryptic, referencing deeper parts of the forest and strange altars. My mind reeled, certain I'd never written those words. On my last night in the hospital, as I sat in bed, drifting in and out of sleep, I glimpsed someone in the hallway. A slender figure with short auburn hair. My chest constricted. Could it be Liv? She turned and waved with that too-wide smile. I blinked, and she was gone. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just a byproduct of trauma. The staff later found me in the hallway, apparently looking for her. They gently guided me back to bed, urging me to rest. I was discharged 2 days later on a crisp fall morning. The outside world looked normal. Cars humming along roads, people on cell phones. Yet I felt a sick certainty that normal was gone for me. As I drove back toward Omaha in a rental car, I never did find my original vehicle out there, I occasionally caught a glimpse of something in the rearview mirror. A shape in the back seat. A silhouette that vanished when I turned my head. Each time I broke into a cold sweat, I had nightmares for weeks afterward. I tried telling my friends what happened, but they mostly offered sympathetic smiles and told me to see a therapist. I looked into the local legends of the Black Hills. Skinwalkers, shapeshifters, spirits that mimic the voices of loved ones. Time warps disappearances. But nothing satisfied the gnawing questions that plagued me. What was that rotted corpse that looked like me? Why did Liv slip into that horrifying possession? Did I really lose Luther, or was he gone the moment we stepped onto that cursed land? A month later, I still find pages mysteriously appearing in my journal, scrawled in my handwriting with references to times that haven't passed, mentioning secrets I don't recall learning. As I'm writing this, I can't help but wonder if everything I experienced was real or some elaborate hallucination. But then I look at the scars on my arms, the jagged cut on my ribs, and the memory of Luther's final whimper, and I know something out there made sure I wouldn't forget. Even now, at night, I sometimes hear a distant whistle, and in my dreams, I see hollow eyes staring from the edge of a green-lit fire. I smell pine needles in my sheets when I wake. I feel the weight of them on my chest as if they're newly placed. My phone occasionally glitches, displaying random dates, flipping through time. I've stopped keeping a normal routine because time feels meaningless. Every so often, I catch a reflection in a window or a mirror that seems just a fraction of a second out of sync with me. I don't know if I escaped whatever was out there or if it followed me home. The only thing I know for certain is that I left a piece of myself behind at Black Elk Peak in those haunted forests. Maybe I left more than a piece. Maybe some part of me, or some twisted copy, remains trapped in that circle of stones, or lies rotting in that shredded tent. And maybe one day I'll catch a glimpse of it again, or hear my own voice calling from behind a line of trees. If that day comes, I doubt I'll have the strength to face it a second time. But for now, I keep my lights on. I keep the windows locked. I wake up in sweats, sometimes seeing Liv's face or hearing Luther's bark in the hallway. My name is David Miller. I am 33 years old, and I'm telling this story to warn you. If you go camping alone in those forests, especially near Black Elk Peak, be prepared to lose track of more than just time. Because once it has you, you can never be sure you truly came back.